The Hagmann Report for today. It is Tuesday, July 7th, 2015. We're coming to you live from the studios of the Hagmann Hagmann Report here in Northwest Pennsylvania. I'm Doug Hagmann at the helm with fellow investigator, researcher, and most importantly, my son, Joe Hagmann. Together, we are the Hagmann Hagmann Report. I like to call us America's premier father-son investigative reporting team. Our job is to bring you the news that propels the headlines, the news that is shaping and twisting and convoluting and really hidden amid a funhouse of smoke and mirrors in the carnival we call the corporate media. And we do the headline and news triage so you don't have to. I want to thank everyone for tuning in to us tonight and every night. Thank you for checking in with us from all over the world. Of course, we broadcast live every Monday from 8 to 11 p.m., every Monday through Friday, 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern Time. Our home base on the Internet is hagmanhagmann.com. And, of course, from there you can access us live, as well as our social networking sites and our original investigative reporting. I want to mention before we get rolling here that tonight's broadcast is sponsored by NatureBox. They ship great tasting and guilt-free snacks right to your door. That's naturebox.com/CFP radio. You know, they've got over 100 flavors to choose from, all of them palate pleasers, all snacks made with integrity. No artificial colors or flavors or sweeteners. These snacks are fabulous. You can choose from over 100, such as pistachio power clusters, Big Island pineapple, mini Belgian waffles, and don't forget the chocolate banana chips. You'll love those. Folks, try NatureBox for free. That's right, for free. Going right now to naturebox.com/CFP radio. That's naturebox.com/CFP radio, or simply go to hagmanhagmann.com. Scroll all the way down on the bottom left-hand side there. You'll find a link to NatureBox. It's our little world on NatureBox, and doing so gets you the free snacks. Just pay for the shipping and have at it. Boy, I'll tell you, you won't be disappointed. It's we're customers, we're consumers here at the studio as well as at our respective households. So we stand by what we talk about here. And tonight, we got a great show for you lined up tonight. As always, a real crowd pleaser, Dave Hodges, just a tenacious investigative journalist, and he's going to be on with us. Joe, welcome to the studio.
Great to be here. We have Dave with us now. His website is The Common Sense Show, as well as his radio show on Sunday nights at 8 o'clock. The new time, and
8 o'clock. That's right.
It will be here streaming live on Sunday night.
Simulcast. Correct.
Simulcast,
Yep.
At the Hagmann Hagmann Report. So, Dave, it's great to have you back on the show.
Hey, it's great to be here, guys. It's been an interesting 24 hours. I was forced out of my home last night, and we had I've been living out here in rural Arizona, north of Phoenix, for about 13 years. And we had a monsoon storm like I've never seen. We had to abandon because we lost 3 big trees, and they were within striking range of the house.
Wow.
And, we barely got out because of the flooding. So we drove to the nearest town, which is about 15 miles away, and hung out in Denny's and drank milkshakes and ate apple pie. And my son got his homework done on his computer, and it was a real interesting time. We lost power for about, 8-9 hours.
My goodness.
Anyway, no worse for the wear. And here's what's weird, guys. If I was a bigger fish in the sea, I would be paranoid, because last night, and they even showed this on the TV radar, and we saw this morning, this storm went over this small area where I live. I don't know, probably about 30 square miles, or it might be 1,700 homes. And the storm went back and forth 4 times. It would come in from the west. It would clear for a few minutes and come back in from the east. I was thinking, let's see. Is HARP after me? What have I done lately?
Well, you guys are all right.
Yeah. Any damage to your home or anything,
Truly, a lot of emotional damage. My wife was in tears this morning. We lost a really big mesquite and 2 others, and it was it's sad because you kind of mark the time by these trees, and but no, we didn't have any structural damage, thank goodness. The Lord protected us, and we were able to get out of flooded roads without any risk. Some of our neighbors weren't quite so lucky. Some of our neighbors had a little bit of damage. We still have about 90 homes out here. I just saw our postmaster from the area, and she was telling me that we still have about 90 homes without power, and hers is one of them.
Oh, my.
So it was one heck of a storm. I've never seen that where a storm backed up, went back and forth 4 times. Never have seen that.
That's incredible. Wow. You know, the weather has been weird all over the country, actually. I'm sure tomorrow night we're going to be talking about that with Dane Wigington and Steve Quayle when we talk about the aerial chemtrail spraying. But yesterday I was talking with a repairman who was at my home, and I got to tell you, Dave, he came in and he said, "You know something?" He said, "The sun is shining 2 blocks away from you on, you know, basically all sides, and you've got like a cloud over your house." And I was thinking back to, the days that I would watch cable television and Married with Children, where I think it was where the guy, his name was Al Bundy, would have a cloud over his house all the time. And it was really strange because it was just that one cloud, and it was raining really hard over, I think maybe 3 or 4 houses, and where I live. So, and we were getting the brunt of it. So we have a dark cloud over our head as well, but not quite like that. Not quite with the destruction potential.
Yeah, I got two guys out here that are pretty avid listeners that live on my block, very short distance away, and one of them accused me this morning of bringing the bad weather. If you didn't cover that stuff, Dave, that we wouldn't be under attack. Did you know that storm backed up 4 times? So yeah, I'm already taking some heat over this. So, yeah, but no worse for the wear. But as I look out to the northeast, the storm clouds are forming again and coming down off the Rocky Mountains. Yeah, we live between 2 mountain ranges, and we don't generally get bad storms, but when they're bad, they're really bad. So we survived. Maybe it's an omen of to come, guys, because I got to tell you, I got a bad feeling in my bones. In fact, I was talking to Steve Quayle yesterday morning, and we were talking about, doing some things, in December. And he said, if we make it that far. And I was thinking the same exact thing. When we mentioned the month, I'm thinking, man, I wonder if we're going to make it to December. Because every time I turn around, I find more and more evidence for FEMA camps. Guys, it's uncanny, the evidence that's pouring out for this. You guys have no doubt been to my website, and you've seen the malls. We have malls, and for the listening audience that may not have been to the commonsenseshow.com for a while, I have published pictures sent to me by eyewitnesses on the ground of malls, and some of these malls are closed. These strip malls are closed, and yet someone's coming in and building guard towers on them. It makes no sense why you would do this with a closed mall. And then there's newer construction, and I wanted to mention this in terms of Marana, Arizona. Marana, Arizona is on I-10, and it's I-10 connects Phoenix to Tucson, and the two cities are about 120 miles apart. And Marana is a bedroom community, probably 15 minutes north of Tucson. It's a community of about 34,000 people, and they're building a mall off with the Twin Peaks Road exit off of I-10. And there is nothing there. Nothing. No thing. I mean, it's, guys, I've got aerial photos I published. There's not housing development, no apartments, no other retail, just this mall in the middle of nowhere. And Marana is only 34,000 people, and I'm told that the nearest housing development's probably a good 8-9 miles away. Who's going to drive there? No one's going to drive there. And this mall has no less than 5 guard towers. I mean, you look at it, it's guard tower stuff. You don't need an imagination. It's not like looking at the clouds and you see Snoopy. These are real, bona fide guard towers. And there are 5 of them around this mall that no one's going to be coming to. There's no anchor for the store, and this is what I get from the locals. And, guys, here's the big catch. It's right next to the interstate, and it's right next to railroad tracks. And I think we both know, or all of us know, what that means.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now, you've got some, actually from your article today, it is today, I just want to make sure, under the title, Every NFL Stadium is a FEMA Camp in Hiding, you've got the images. And folks can go to HagmannHagmann.com on the right-hand side. We're linked directly to Dave Hodges' website, thecommonsenseshow.com. But you've got images of the Marina Mall, middle of nowhere, next to railroad tracks, with these structures. They're guard towers, I guess. I mean, a guard tower.
Back a couple of days, I've got aerial photos, ground photos. I probably have 50 photos of those malls. I had a gentleman named Harold who sent me a bunch of photos that I couldn't upload to the website. So I put out an article, a request. Hey, guys, could you check out on the mall down there at Twin Peaks Road, I-10, north of Marana? And the next day, I had 50 photos. And those have continued to grow. And I, fortunately, because of great listeners and great readers that I have that are willing to get off their backside and go do something, sent me all these wonderful photos. And boy, FEMA camp in waiting. And just the way it's constructed like a prison compound. But see, it's not just Marana. I don't want to have people think this is an isolated case. I've got a photo I published, 10 days ago, of a strip mall in England, near Birmingham, England, that's closed. And the person showed me before and after photos, and they put guard towers on them, on a strip mall that's closed. Same thing up in Washington State. I've got the same exact thing. And I've got these photos people are sending me from I can't keep up with my email. I've probably in the last 6-7 days have probably had somewhere around 5,000 emails. And I'd say probably 80% of them are people sending me pictures of structures that could be FEMA camps in the way they're designed. And a lot of it is the malls around the country. I mean, from Tampa to Charlotte to Atlanta to Denver. It's incredible, guys, what I'm getting here. And there's too much of a pattern for this not to be real, that we're now seeing a change in architecture to where guard towers are becoming the norm. Now, I've had people try to write to me. I suspect they're COINTELPRO, but they write to me and they go, oh, this is just architectural design. You're making something out of nothing. Well, I would almost believe that, except, guys, they're doing this on malls that are closed. That doesn't make any sense at all. And it's not just the malls that they're doing this with. It's the schools. And, Doug, when I pointed you to my article on Sunday, you had a real noticeable reaction when you saw some of those schools that I published, like Regis Jesuit High School in Southwest Metropolitan Denver. I mean, is there any question when you look at that's a guard tower and prison fencing? And then that high school in Brooklyn, New York, I think it was called South Slope, and the barbed wire, the heavy fencing, the metal doors, and the cameras. Incredible.
Yeah.
The
Park Slope School in Brooklyn, New York.
That's right. Oh, that's it.
Yeah.
And man, oh man, it's all over the country. And you go around the Phoenix metropolitan area here too, and I've been hypersensitive to this now since these things have arisen with regard to FEMA camps, and these schools are being constructed like prisons. And in some places, I had a lady send me some pictures from elementary schools in Atlanta that have guard towers in the center of the school. It's mind-boggling. So we see, okay, the malls are set up for FEMA camp conversion. And I should mention this too, Doug. This is a real important point. Back in 2012, I published an article in which I noted that DHS and Simon Properties had reached an agreement that Simon Properties would allow its facilities to be used for emergency centers. And they even used the word detention in the description, detention centers. And Simon Properties is the biggest owner of malls and strip malls in North America. And what's interesting is on most of these photos that people sent me, because they read the articles, and so they know I'm looking at Simon Properties, they will go get a property deed, and they'll go, this is a Simon Property Mall. The one in Marana is ultimately owned by Simon Properties through a subsidiary. So to me, there's your DHS FEMA camp connection, but that's not all. At the same time frame in 2012, the DHS signed an agreement with every major league sports league to do the same thing. And today, you saw I ran that article. Every NFL stadium is a FEMA camp in hiding, and it's not just the NFL. It's the NHL now in their arenas, the NBA in their sports arenas, Major League Baseball in their stadiums. But I published photos in there, and I showed how their practices for admissions are just like the TSA. Their practices before they let fans come in. They're separating, like in Kansas City Arrowhead Stadium where the Kansas City Chiefs football team plays, they're separating men and women, just like they do in a FEMA camp. And someone wrote to me after they saw that sign in today's article and said, that's UN signage, Dave, for detention camps. And he was breaking it down for me, and I'm going to study it more, after the show tonight. Yeah, I didn't even catch that part of it, but this gentleman was explaining this, and I've got to go do some research because I think there's a fair chance he's right. But they're doing the metal screenings, the wanting, and I have a confession to make, guys, and I'm almost ashamed of myself. My wife about 10 days ago said, what do you want to do on the 4th, honey? And I said, I don't know. We were supposed to do the fireworks thing and have some hot dogs and hamburgers. And she goes, why don't we go down to the Diamondbacks game? And I wasn't thinking. And I said, yeah, it's fine. I love baseball, and fireworks would be a good family night. So I took the family down there, and we come up to the stadium where the Diamondbacks play, and they had about a dozen security lines out to the street. And I'm thinking, oh, my gosh, why am I here? And you could see the TSA door frames you got to walk through for metal screening. And, here we are. And I'm thinking, why am I doing this? So the 20 minutes I'm sitting there in line, I'll never get back. And finally we get up to the line. Now, I'm just wearing gym shorts and a T-shirt. And they have the same thing they have at the TSA. You take out your wallet, you take out your keys and your cell phone and all that stuff, and you put it in. Now, I had nothing on me, nothing, just my body and my clothes. Well, I didn't know I set off the detector, so I walked through thinking I'm pulling my stuff out of this little can, and the guy goes, step over there to secondary. I said, I don't know what you're talking about. Secondary? What's that? Over there, right now. And this guy was unbelievably harsh. I said, can you please explain to me what I did? He goes, you set off the alarm. Weren't you paying attention? And he was just berating me. And finally I looked at him and said, how many terrorists you caught today? And he looks at me, and I said, how many terrorists you catch today? He goes, just get over there before I throw you out. So then this guy comes up to me, and I says, well, we're going to have an understanding here. You're not putting your hands on me. He says, no. I says, good, because I said I'm already married. So he gets the wand out, and he starts wanting me. And I said, how does it feel to – I said, do you know how many people TSA has ever caught with this kind of equipment at the airports? He goes, no. I said, 0. None. How many have you caught today? He just looks at me, says, have a nice day, sir. In other words, what I told him is you guys are so full of crap out here. You're subjecting these people to massive violation of Fourth Amendment rights. You're terrorizing these people. You're making them late to get into the game. You're inconveniencing them. It's 110 degrees out here in Phoenix, Arizona in July, and it's just unbelievable, Doug, what people put up with. And I will never go back. I don't fly. And I've written to all the airlines, and I said this is why Dave Hodges doesn't fly. Last time I flew was to go back and see my mom right before she passed, and I made an exception. But generally, if we want to go somewhere, like we're going on vacation, we are not flying. We're driving. And I will not go to another professional sporting event again. In fact, when I walked through the metal doorways there, I interlaced my fingers and put them behind my head. Like I was hostage. Oh, yeah, it drew a little laughter from the people, and I think that's why that guy was so mad at me. Because I was trying to make a mockery of the whole situation.
Well,
this is why I don't know why Americans put up with it, and I want everyone listening to me to say, I forgot for a second, family night, 4th of July, baseball, hot dogs, fireworks, and great family night. And I had fun once I was in. We had a good time. But just the pain in the rear it takes to go to a public event today, don't go, people. Listen to me. Save your money.
Thank you.
Stay home. And honestly, if everybody did that, these people would be screaming at DHS that we're not going to do this anymore. We're losing too much business.
Dave, I've often said this, that if we just stop flying, and I mean, look, I understand there are people who believe that they've got to fly for business, but it's certainly not the majority. You've got a lot of families going to. I mean, when I look at the airports and seeing who's flying, a lot of the people there are going on vacation. If you take that discretionary travel and just not fly, but in so doing, you also tell the airlines why, like you did. We could change things, and the same with the stadiums. I remember, Dave, when you were 2-3 years ago, when you and Alex Jones were talking about this very issue about TSA coming to stadiums, and people scoffed and said, "Nah,
Yeah,
that's
exactly. I said this was coming.
Yeah,
it's coming to trains. It's already in trains and a lot of train stations, but buses, and now I'm understanding. Now people are going to say, "Oh, Dave, you're over the top on this," but listen to me, folks. Interstate highway security roadblocks. And I've got the inside information from my local state patrol here in Arizona. I know people who talk to me. And on I-17 between Flagstaff and Phoenix, on the side of the road, they have the strips laid out. So if you go down the wrong way, they flatten your tires, and the video equipment.
Oh,
and this
man.
I-17 running through the edge of the Rocky Mountains. And they're going to be doing stops. And they're going to be doing the get out, we think you're a terrorist, we need to strip search you, we need to feel up your mother, because this is what, you've seen the stories with TSA.
Sure.
Now, I will say this, at the baseball game, they didn't try to put their hands on me, nor would I let them. I'd go to jail for it, let someone, do to me what they do at the airport that I won't permit to have happen. But we have power. You look at Walmart, and they practice slave labor overseas. They're complicit here in Jade Helm, and we can get into that a little bit tonight, too.
Absolutely.
But, people need to stop shopping at Walmart. Forget the fact that prices are a little cheaper. I mean, is your freedom for sale? That's what you have to ask yourself. When you go into Walmart, what you're saying is, hey, I'm here to save a few pennies and the Constitution be damned, and I don't care about my civil liberties.
Amen.
And people just need to stay away out of the Walmarts, the Kmarts, the slave marts, the NFL, the NBA. You want to go see sporting events. Doug, I was a college basketball coach. And actually, I kind of hesitate to say this because people really criticize me. I miss coaching, but I will not go back to college because I don't want the 4 to 5 nights away from home. I want to see my son running his cross-country meets and do all that fun stuff. But I did take a job at a local high school coaching basketball. And because I miss it. And I don't know how much time we have left. And this is one thing I really want to impart upon people tonight. I'm making a very concentrated effort to spend more quality time with my wife, with my family. Concentrated effort. I'm trying to make the most out of each day. And I also want to engage in activities that bring me joy and pleasure. People say, oh, gee, you must love just writing this stuff for the website. I like informing people. I want people to know what's coming so they can better prepare. I feel it's my Christian duty to do so, the watchman in the tower kind of duty. Right. I don't like doing this. I was happiest in my life when we moved into our home that we said someday it'd be our retirement home where we're at now. 13 years ago, I was coaching college basketball, teaching my college courses, and, raising my family. I loved my life then. I didn't need anything else. Good marriage. I didn't need to have this drama come in. But when John McCain and his New World Order forces showed up and tried to steal the properties of 2,000 of my neighbors out here in rural Arizona, that's what really launched my, writing career and my broadcasting career, because somehow these people decided they wanted me to be the spokesperson, and one thing led to another, and before you know it, I got a radio show and I'm writing for different websites. I didn't ask for this to happen. And, actually, it's kind of like going to war. You know it needs to be done, but you got to but you look forward to the day when you no longer have to do it, although I don't ever see an end to this. I'll probably do this as long as God gives me, breath to breathe and energy to write and to speak. But I wish I didn't have to do this, Doug. I really would like to go back to the life I had 13 years ago, but as they say, you can't go home again. And so, I don't fight a battle just to fight the battle. I fight to win. And I'm in this to win it. And I don't know, Doug, where this is going, because I have a real bad feeling about this fall. I really do.
Yeah, I do as well. And David, let me just reintroduce you. Dave Hodges is our guest. And folks, if you don't know who he is, my goodness, you haven't been paying attention. Dave Hodges is a prolific writer, author for the CommonSenseShow.com website. His articles are picked up everywhere. And he's got one of the highest-ranking websites on the Internet. He's extremely tenacious in terms of his research. And I'll say this, every week, every Sunday, I tune into the Common Sense Show to listen to Dave Hodges. And I know a week from this Sunday, Steve Quayle will be on with Dave talking about certain subjects, including the start of Jade Helm. But, now tonight we're listening to the man behind the pen, the man behind the keyboard, the man behind the microphone, who he is. And by the way, he's a great friend of ours. He's a great friend of the program, great friend of ours, and we do share a lot of information. So it's just such a pleasure to have such a 5-star guest on our program tonight. So, Dave, with that, I just want to say thank you for.
Thank you for that, Doug. And I want to push some kudos your way too, because we had some, let's put it this way, circumstances were adding up to where the Common Sense Show broadcast was in danger. And Doug Hagmann and Joe Hagmann stepped up and offered to give me a landing place, which has led to us, by the end of this month, we'll be both simulcasting our shows, to infinity. Well, as far as you guys are, as long as you're on the air, we're going to pick it up on the Common Sense Show website. People can just go there and click, and we'll have a banner for it. And you put yourself out there for me. And then not only that, here's Doug, and he's trying to fight through the bad back and all that. And I was supposed to have Bob Fletcher on to talk about Planet X this last Sunday, and Bob got burned out of his neighborhood, and he had to evacuate. And he sends me a message a few minutes before airtime, Dave, I'm really sorry to do this to you, but they're evacuating us. So I completely understood. In fact, he was supposed to be on Coast to Coast last night, and he wasn't on. They brought on Bruce Lip as a substitute guest, who, by the way, is a great guest. I met Bruce at a conference one time. I need to pursue getting him on. But, I wish Bob well, and I pray for his safety. So what I did is I called Doug 12 minutes before airtime, and I said, can you do an hour? I'd already filled the second hour with my good friend Jim White from the Liberty Brothers. And Doug, just being the trooper he is, said, yeah, I'll do that. So thank you very much for doing that. We had a quality broadcast. We had a little archive problem this morning, but it's straightened out. I'm going to be posting that archive up on the website later this evening, and probably send it over to Steve for publication tomorrow, Steve Quayle.
That's cool.
But thank you very much for doing that, and I'm glad to see that the Hagmann and Hagmann Report and the Common Sense Show are starting to combine forces here as we simulcast each other's show.
We need to do that, Dave. I'll tell you something. It's getting pretty hairy out there, and we're getting, without getting into detail, we're getting shots across our bow, every once in a while. I can just see a time when we are not going to be free to talk about these issues over an internet-type venue, okay? The control mechanism. You talk about control in your articles. You talk about the physical control, physical control of people, and of course, you also talk about the what was it called? Well, the internet regulation, regulating the internet. You've written extensively about that as well. I can see where we are not going to be permitted to talk, so we are making preparations, and I know Dave without getting a lot of the detail, preparations are being made to continue our broadcast and the Common Sense Show, the Hagmann Hagmann Report, and other potential allies. Without getting into detail, that will astound a lot of people, I think. But we're working hard behind the scenes to do that. And Dave is an integral part of that, a very critical component of what we're doing. So it's great.
Well, we're certainly got a plan we got to have plan B, C, D, and triple Z, because the bad guys have great staying power, and they're doing their best to try to keep us from spreading the word. And we're getting close. And for everyone listening, say, is that day ever going to come when committed followers of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report, it's going to pay off and we're really starting to change things? And my answer is an unqualified yes. There's social psychological research out there by a group called SNARC, S-N-A-R-C, and you can Google this. And they asked the question a few years ago, and the Tipping Point book also addressed this. When you have a fad and a trend, how many people have to be involved in this until it becomes an absolute obsession with the country and becomes a committed movement? And the answer is you only need 10%. And I think we're already at the 10% and exceeding it. And guys, I know your numbers on your show are exploding. My radio listenership has quadrupled since March. My internet base, my website, has doubled in the last 4 months. It's the growth is unbelievable, and this has nothing to do with Dave Hodges broadcasting, Dave Hodges writing. I'm still doing the same things I was doing 4 months ago. It has to do with first-time people, and I'm averaging about 40% of the people coming to my website now are brand new, never been there before, and that's happening every single month. 40% of that base is brand new. And that means they're the people that were watching Wolf Blitzer and Sean Hannity and these guys, and all of a sudden now they want to see, they know they're being lied to. They know things aren't as they're being told. And so now they're coming to listen to Doug and Joe and Steve Quayle and Dave Hodges and John B. Wells, and they want to find out, are things different? Who's going to tell me the truth here? And this is why I feel really, and I know you guys feel the same way I do, I feel a very special burden. I mean, it's a burden of love, but it's also a kind of an onerous burden. I need to be accurate. I need to be on top of my reporting, because right now I think people are making life decisions based on some of the things that we broadcast and what we write. And that is a tremendous responsibility. And really, when I think about it, the gravity of it scares me. I have no problem taking responsibility for the decisions I make for myself and my family. But when we're talking about people that follow us and the numbers that are following right now, it scares me, because I'm afraid of saying the wrong thing. I'm afraid of giving people the wrong message, and it doesn't work out. That's really, of everything I do, guys, that is my biggest fear right now, would be to say anything that would bring harm to someone because they listen to Dave Hodges.
You know, Dave, that's our biggest concern as well. We're on our knees. We hit our knees and we ask for guidance, because we don't know sometimes, what we don't know. I mean, you're right. Here I go stuttering. But you're right. It's a heck of a responsibility. And when you put up, for example, these images, these photographs, to me, they're clear cut. I mean, for example, right now on monitor 1 here, I'm looking at the stadium entry line. Families on one side, female on the other side. Now, seriously, have somebody explain that, the logical reasoning behind that sign, and have it be clear and believable. The reason I say this is because people will accuse you of, they accuse us and Steve Quayle of fear mongering, of saying, oh, this is, of just overstating our case, being hyperbolic in our presentation. Well, I look at just that one picture, and this is just one example of many. And I ask anyone in the mainstream media to really justify a sign like that, or outside of conditioning, justify the purpose of something like that for stadium entry. I know I kind of went sideways on that topic, Dave.
You're right. I know. You didn't go sideways. I feel the same way that you do. This is why you may have noticed a trend in my writing over the last 3 or 4 months. I've gone a lot more to photographic imagery and a little less on the literary. I used to average about 22 to 2,300 words an article now, and ballpark is 1,400. And I've gone more to graphics and imagery because there's nothing like a picture to really convey the message. And when you look at these people who are in line to go to an NFL football game, and if you go to the commonsenseshow.com in today's article, you can see this, where on one column of pictures I'll have what TSA does, extremely invasive, Fourth Amendment violations. Really, it's sexual assault, second-degree sexual assault. They should be doing 5 years for each instance. And then on the right-hand column is a very similar picture, the exact same kind of poses and intrusions, and only it's NFL game. So you have TSA on one hand at the airport and NFL on the other, and there are your pictures. And what I find that people get, I could write, hey, there are guard towers, and KDW from Aurora, Colorado wrote to me and said, I saw guard towers on such and such a mall in a school. There's nothing like a picture.
That's right.
And this is why I've slightly modified, the approach I've taken to my writing now, because people want to say, well, show me the proof. Okay, well, I put a hypertext link in there, and some people don't get that. I'm not going to be insulting here, but some people don't get that. So what I do then is I'm thinking, okay, I'll put the hypertext link in, and I'll also add a picture if it's available. And that seems to be really my best responses to articles is really when I have good pictures. So what I do is every week, I have a little trick here, and it's not very clever, but it's been effective, is every week on Sunday, I run the same article and say, be a part of the Common Sense Show team and send us your pictures, your storylines, your descriptions, and your videos. And my gosh, have people ever responded in force? And to those who are listening who do that, thank you. Thank you very much, because here's what people criticize me on, guys. This is kind of funny. When I first published the pictures of the Marana Mall, and the person wanted me to use their name. They were proud of the work they did, as they should be. So I put it out there. And then someone wrote to me in the comments and said their name and go, who the hell are they? You shouldn't be quoting who. They have no sort. I'm thinking, do you understand they just sent a picture of what we're talking about? That's the best journalism there is. Yeah,
exactly. You don't need a sheepskin hanging on your wall to obtain evidentiary proof, photographic documentation of something that's in clear visual range. And I find too, and boy, I find that a lot of people are really in a very serious state of denial about the lateness of the hour and about the events that are taking place around them. And it's kind of an evil genius in a way by the powers that are doing this. That, for example, you can attempt to justify an image like the stadium entry line image that you've got up there, or you can attempt to justify or explain away certain security measures at the games, college games. But it really doesn't. It's just pablum for the uninformed mind, in my view. And oh man. So what I'm seeing and folks, go to the commonsenseshow.com, thecommonsenseshow.com, and please bookmark that website. Take a look at all of Dave's articles, including his latest, the images. Tell me that the images don't send chill up your spine. Man.
Oh yeah, I know. I actually went back for this NFL nonsense because it started in a big way for the 2013 football season. So, we're coming up on 2015, so not quite 2 years ago. And the Arizona Republic ran a big article on the new security procedures. And, of course, they're owned by Gannett, and so they're a big globalist mouthpiece. And therefore, everything from, vaccinations to there are no chemtrails and no Agenda 21, and you get the idea. So they ran this article about the NFL game security. And it's so draconian. Women can't take purses. Everything has to be in a clear plastic bag. And so they interviewed this one gal who she brought her purse mistakenly and had to go back to her car. And her daughter, her teenage daughter, said, "So why do I have to show my tampons in a clear plastic bag?" That was in the article. Not
I
trying
saw
to be thick or gross here, and I'm saying this to the audience. I'm not trying to be graphic, but this was in the newspaper article. Well, this gal got it. You know, Mrs. Kish's daughter, Amanda, got it. But there was this other lady, they interviewed her, and she didn't seem to like it, but here's what she said. I'm going to quote. "It's kind of a nuisance, but I do understand the rule. It's a whole new world, and you've got to follow the rules and regulations to be safe." You know, that woman must have been absent that day that they covered Benjamin Franklin's famous quote that said, "Any society that gives up a little liberty to gain a little security will deserve neither and lose both." And she must have been gone that day in class. These people who do this security at games catch nobody. I mean, nobody. It's just DHS saying it, and the sheep go ba-ba, and they go ahead and do it. And I'm just saying, stop going to public events. Stop.
That's right.
You know, NFL, and let me just say this, Doug, I used to be out of college. You know, my first teaching job at a high school, I was the head basketball, baseball, and football coach. You know, and I played basketball in college. Played all three sports in high school. You know, I have a good sports background. I love sports. You know, my son has been raised in sports. But I look at this crap. I've gone to my last major league sporting event. I'm not going to watch it. If I really need to have a fix, I'll go to the high school games where you don't have to worry about your wife's breasts being felt up by a complete stranger. That's really where you can go. You go to where the game is most pure and enjoy it. I'm done, and people need to be done. The NFL is a $30 billion a year business, and they have tax exemption. They pay no tax. They're a complete monopoly, $30 billion a year and no tax. I don't know how they're tax exempt. So let's withdraw our participation. The NFL would be screaming about these security procedures. But it's just all part of the conditioning. It's police state America. You know, we have kids in some schools now walking through metal detectors to go into schools. You know, I had a picture of a kid, I believe it was yesterday, in my yesterday's article. Couldn't have been more than a first grader, and the security policeman at the school was putting on one of these magnetic wands over him. You know, to go to school, a 6-year-old to go to school, like a 6-year-old terrorist. And this is insanity. Don't shop at these malls. Withdraw your participation. Don't put your money in the corporate banks, the mega banks. Do what I'm doing. I'm converting my cash to gold and silver, and Steve Quayle's my supplier. Your money is going to be gone, and we should probably talk about this. We're Greece. It ain't going to be like Cyprus.
Exactly.
And say, hey, you got $100 in the bank? Well, now you got 40. That was Cyprus. It's going to be, you know that money you had in the bank? Well, we declared it about a year ago to be an unsecured deposit. That means it's not money. It's ours. Goodbye. That's coming, folks. You need to keep a manageable amount that you pay your monthly bills on, and you need to start buying resources that you can convert to real wealth-bearing instruments, such as gold, silver, precious metal coins, of course, guns and ammo to protect it, food and water, and so forth. That's where your money should be being spent. You people who are keeping your money in the RIAs, the Roths, your pensions, and all, you're going to take a bath. I don't believe you have a year left with your money, and I could be wrong, but I don't see it. We have an $18 trillion debt. That's the good news. We have a $240 trillion unfunded mandated liability, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. Can't pay that. We should, because we have a contract with the people, but I don't see how we can pay it. And then we have the monster in the room, $1.5 minimum quadrillion credit swap derivatives debt, of which we paid $505 trillion of interest in the last year. Well, the entire GDP of the planet on the high-end estimate is about $70 trillion. And our interest on this imaginary debt, $505 trillion interest on the credit swap derivatives debt. We can't pay off these debts in the 22nd century, the 32nd century, or the 82nd century. There is no paying this off. So what's going to happen to your cash? The only thing that was backing the dollar up certainly wasn't gold, wasn't silver. It was petro, the petrodollar. Well, what's
Amen.
the world doing now? They're all getting back into gold. The BRICS. The BRICS are undermining the petrodollar. This is going to be the basis for World War III. Russia and China and India are leading the way. And as a consequence, your dollar is going to crash. It's going to go down like a submarine in screen doors. And I'm telling people right now, and I'm sure of this, I said I worry about giving people bad advice. You leave your money in the bank and you take the hit, you have no one to blame but yourself. All the signs are there.
I agree. I want to say this. I received an email, and if this person is listening, it's a first-hand account of Greece. It's someone sent me a series of emails, and I'm not sure if it was just sent to me or if it was sent to others, but this listener has a friend in Greece, and these are emails from that person in Greece. You know who I'm referring to. If you're listening, you know who you are. I did send an email asking if I could publish these emails. Dave, I got to tell you, and listeners, let me say something to you. What is going on in Greece is not being accurately portrayed in the media here in the States or in the Western media. We know that, but to read, I don't know, just to read the inside account, the first-person account from someone living there, day by day by day by day, it's chilling.
You know what they have, and I've gotten this from emails from people in Greece. The government now, to try to keep order, and they've been doing this for at least a year, probably much longer, but they actually hire people, kind of like fifth-column citizens, the way I think of this, and they intersperse themselves in the shopping malls and the restaurants and on the streets, and if they hear someone putting the government down, they beat the crap out.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Do you know about that?
Yep. You cannot, yes. Everything, right, well, they have people, well, I don't want to talk out of school, but since you mentioned this, from this emailer, you don't dare talk about the government in like a Starbucks environment. You don't dare talk about the government in at your workplace. Oh my goodness, the government has people listening to you, spies, if you will. I don't know how else to describe them. You might as well just say what they are, spies. They'll take you to the woodshed, literally.
Well, they tell these stories about they'll hear someone talk. They don't make a scene in the restaurant. They wait for the person to get up and go to their car, and that's when they jump them.
Exactly. Yeah, and people are scared to death. Their mail is being opened. Any incoming or outgoing mail. Well, I guess people. I'm not really breaking many confidences there, but to hear the things that are taking place, there's no money. There's no food. The Muslim infiltration, and now this is open source, but not quite stated the way this emailer did state. They are importing Muslims into Greece, the island as well, the islands around the areas around Greece, and into Greece. These are not homeless, destitute Muslims. A lot of them. These are well-dressed, very well taken care of. They have cell phones. They've got money. They've got, this is a deliberate infusion of Muslims into the Greece, the fabric of their society, with the intent to balkanize Greece as they're to America. But this is being done at the very highest of levels. Of course, they've got others, immigration problem as well. But to hear that, man, there's some manipulation going on at high levels, at all levels, but specifically high levels.
Well, we have the refugee resettlement program, and 9,000 Syrians, and I don't think we're exactly popular with Syrians now, given the fact that we made the civil war go the direction that it's going, and we brought 9,000 Syrians into Idaho. And this kind of refugee resettlement is going on all over. In fact, I remember reading a companion piece to that story, and the FBI was quoted as saying, we don't have time to vet all these people coming into the country. Yet, they'll grope us, they'll feel us up at the airports, they'll subject us to unconstitutional searches at the stadiums, but they won't vet people who are coming in from areas known to be hostile to the United States. What's wrong with that picture?
Well, we've seen this really since the mid-1960s from Johnson. However, the bigger picture here is really the destruction of America's middle class, because America's got to fall from within, and of course the middle class has got to go, and the moral and cultural fabric of America, it's got to be just taken down. So this is all orchestrated. Absolutely orchestrated. So, yeah, you're exactly right.
I totally agree with you. It's as I've said before on your show, I look at what's coming in three parts, and I've been very consistent in saying this for 3 years now. We're looking at false flags, precipitating incident or incidences. We're looking for the excuse from that to roll out martial law. From that, you get things like gun confiscation, total evisceration of civil liberties. So people are at your beck and call for the government, and interspersed with that, at the tail end of martial law, I believe World War III will begin. And see, this is Basil's bright idea. The bankers, the big bankers, the ones that control and tell the Federal Reserve and the Bank of England what to do, they want a depopulation war.
Yes.
And that's what World War III is going to be. And no one in a civilized country who had a choice would ever participate in the kind of wars that are coming. So you've got to strip people of their rights. You've got to put a lot of them in detention camps and exterminate them. And people say, oh, Dave, that's crazy. Oh, really? Let's go back, to someone that you and I both knew pretty well. You guys knew Larry Grathwohl pretty well, and I interviewed Larry
absolutely
times on my show, and I had a number of phone conversations with him, and I found him to be the most forthright, honest individual I ever met. Now, most people will have heard of Larry, but in case you haven't, he was hired as an FBI special informant, and his job was to penetrate the Weatherman Underground run by Bill Ayers and his wife today, Bernadine Dorn. And his actions and her actions resulted in the deaths of both American law enforcement and also American citizens. Bernadine Dorn did time in prison. Bill Ayers was able to escape. This wasn't a hippie group, as they've been portrayed. They were master's degree people from Ivy League schools. Bill Ayers' father, Tom Ayers, was the head of Con Ed of Illinois. Here's where this is going. You said, really, there won't be extermination in FEMA camps in America in the modern age? Let's just consider a couple things. Larry Grathwohl reports this, and I got the video up in yesterday's article on thecommonsenseshow.com, and Larry Grathwohl talked about how he interviewed Bill Ayers. He said, well, Bill, if you ever win and you get this communist takeover that you want, what will you do first? And he says, well, probably we're going to have to round up. And this is when America had 180 million Americans. You're going to have to round up 50 million Americans and put them in re-education camps in the Southwest, and we'll have to kill half of them. Well, those numbers today translate to not 25 million dead, but probably closer to 40 million executed. And Steve and I were actually talking about that yesterday morning, and he said, I think it'll be 50%, Dave. He says it's going to be closer to 100, and I agree with him. Now, this is where this gets significant. Bill Ayers and Bernadine Dorn, and many of you will already know this, launched the political career of one Barack Hussein Obama from their South Side Chicago home. Bill Ayers still visits the White House today. I documented that in yesterday's article.
Oh, Dave, that's not the same Bill Ayers. There's a lot of people named Bill Ayers.
Yeah, well, there's people putting on false Ayers too, but this is the real Bill Ayers. And Bill Ayers is a friend of this president. He's unashamed. I ran an interview that Elders did with Sean Hannity, after Bill Ayers was on, and he was unrepentant about the terrorist activities he was involved in, the bombs that he set off. One of them resulted in the death of the San Francisco policeman.
Yep.
He could care less. And this is the guy who launched Obama's career. And we're not supposed to be worried. And the fact that he still has contact with Obama, and this man is unrepentant for his actions, these weren't youthful indiscretions. He's proud of what he did. That's why I put the Elders interview up there with Sean Hannity, to show that this man hasn't changed. So here's the mindset that was present when he and his wife launched the career of Barack Hussein Obama. We should be really worried about what's coming. But even if we,
I didn't mean to overtalk you. I know there's a little bit of a delay here, but I don't know if I ever said this, Dave. I wanted to tell you this before this escaped my memory here. Joe might remember this. I'm not sure how much we did off air. I know we did a lot off air. Larry Grathwell and I and Joe, I mean, we had a lot of many off air conversations. Now, about a month, maybe 2 months before he passed away, well, reportedly, ostensibly from a heart attack, they found him in his apartment. After not hearing from him for a period of time. I'm just not going to get into the details, but there's some really odd things about that. But we were talking, and I think some of this did make it to the on-air interview that we did with him, I think maybe 2 or 3 months prior to his passing. We were going to pick him up or go with him and confront Bill Ayers with cameras and microphones, and we were going to act as his kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say bodyguards, but, accompanied, we were going to accompany him. And in fact, we were planning on doing this when Ayers was going to be speaking at a university. I think it was outside of Chicago, perhaps. I know he lives there, but he had a speaking engagement. And we were talking about doing this, about confronting him and getting him to admit on camera, or at least confronting him with because Bill Ayers never, and Larry Grathwell, Larry Grathwell never confronted Bill Ayers publicly, or Bill Ayers would never allow Larry Grathwell to confront him publicly and ask questions. So we were going to make that happen. I just wanted to, and then 2 months later, he's not with us any longer. Now I'm just stating a fact, okay?
Well, Larry's daughter, who I believe lives in California, does not believe that was an accidental death.
No, I get that. The natural death, yeah, I get that. It's difficult because you're dealing with family members who have families of their own, and there's a fear factor there, and there's a concern there, and you're dealing with some people who are pretty nasty people. So, yeah. I know you've got a break coming up, and so we come back. I want to bridge the gap here after the top of the hour with talking about Obama's legislative actions that make us look at his association with Bill Ayers and Bill Ayers' intent to want to kill. In 1968, he wanted to kill 25 million Americans to get America the way he wanted. I want to bridge that gap with Obama's actions in office as the chief executive when we come back. All right, sir.
That'll be interesting. Yeah, we'll take that break now. Folks, you're listening to the Hagmann Hagmann Report on this Tuesday, July 7th, 2015. Our guest tonight is Dave Hodges. His website is thecommonsenseshow.com. Bookmark that site for excellent content up to the, just incredible articles, especially on the FEMA camps. And Dave, before we go to the break, have you ever heard of a death camp that borders Arizona to Mexico? I have a listener who wants me to ask you about a death camp on the border of Arizona and Mexico. They say that this camp is huge. It has deep water trenches dug around it, and apparently it's near you.
I don't have direct knowledge of that, no, but I will tell you this. As I pointed out, with shopping malls and strip malls and stadiums and schools, you can make a FEMA camp about out of anything. Converted POW camps that held Japanese American citizens, keyword American citizens of Japanese descent, those have reportedly been converted to FEMA camps. Abandoned military bases have been. Alex Jones, when he did his piece with Jesse Ventura on conspiracy theory, they found a number of FEMA camps that look like playgrounds from the outside. So when you guys look at this, I don't have specific knowledge of what he's talking about, but I will tell you what's down on the Arizona-Texas border are ISIS base camps. In fact, Judicial Watch produced documentation 2 months ago that shows there is knowledge of this government and the Mexican government of an ISIS base camp in conjunction with the Mexican drug cartels 8 miles from El Paso, Texas, 3 miles from the Mexican border. That is well documented, and I've referenced that several times in print.
You have, and you've done a fabulous job.
And I'll try and get the information pulled up here about this specific thing and send it to you if I can. But we'll go to
I'll stay and go down and look at it. I mean, it's probably about a 4.5, 5 hour drive for me, but, if I get something credible with some pictures and something that makes it look like it's worth my trip, I'll go down there and I'll photograph, I'll videotape, and I'll interview people. But I've got to have some basis to make me want to go.
Well, I'll try to get the proper
I've got where that came from.
Okay.
So.
All right. Well, let's do this. Let's take our break now, and we'll come back on the other side and get into the Obama's legislative actions and how Bill Ayers plays into this. Folks, you're listening to the Hagmann Hagmann Report. Dave Hodges is our guest. We'll be right back after the short message. Hour number 2 of the Hagmann Hagmann Report on this Tuesday, July 7th, 2015. Our guest tonight, Mr. Dave Hodges. His website is thecommonsenseshow.com. And let's get right back into it. Go ahead, Dave. You were going to talk about Obama's legislative actions and in connection with his connection to Bill Ayers.
Well, yeah, so much to cover in so little time, but I think I just want to, for the purpose of brevity, just stick to 2 major points here. One is everyone will know, and I'll spend very little time on this, and that's the NDAA. And the NDAA, as everybody knows, allows the president or his designees to kidnap people off the street and deny them all due process. No one needs to know where they're at, or even if they're alive. They don't get legal representation. They don't have to have their day in court. And, of course, if you're ever tried under the NDAA and related enemy combatant designations, they can use hearsay evidence against you. You're not entitled to an attorney. I could go on and on. It's a real kangaroo court. Well, that is designed to be the Gestapo, let's go pull them off the streets and put them away in a deep, dark place so they can't wake people up. That's the NDAA. And that, I remember Chris Hedges came out and said the end of America when that passed. And I totally agree with Chris. He's 100% right. This is when we became a fascist, Gestapo, East German Stasi-loving nation. That's what we're under right now, those kind of regulations. But there's something particularly disturbing, and I've mentioned this executive order before on your show in a very general way, and tonight I'm going to be specific, and it's a little involved, so be patient with me. Excuse me, but I'm talking about Executive Order 13603, and I'm going to talk about 2 provisions. This is a very, 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 very involved executive order. It's the control of everything in the country. I mean everything, from the clothes on your back to all food production to all water, everything. But I want to focus on 2 specific and very narrow things in this bill that should scare the living heck out of everybody. 13603, and you can find this on my website. I'm actually going to write about it again tomorrow and give it a modern twist into Jane Helm. And you've got Section 601, and this act specifies how far the government can go in terms of making you their slave. And I am not exaggerating with the terminology and vocabulary that I'm using. Section 601, I'm just going to read a couple of brief sections, then I'm going to go to Section 802, and this is where I'm going to send chills up and down your spine if you're not familiar with this. Section 601, the Secretary of Labor, in coordination with the Secretary of Defense and the heads of other agencies as deemed appropriate by the Secretary of Labor, shall, 1, collect and maintain data necessary to maintain a continuing appraisal of the nation's workforce needs for purposes of national defense. 2, upon request by the Director of the Selective Service and in coordination with the Secretary of Defense, assist the Director of Selective Service in developing policies related to the induction and internment of persons for duty in the armed forces. Now, that's just a basic old draft, but what to the untrained eye and someone who's not versed at all in constitutional law and procedures, what should catch anyone's attention who knows anything about the Constitution would be the fact that the Secretary of Labor is involved. This should be all DOD stuff. This should all be selective service stuff. But now the Secretary of Labor is involved, and when I go to Section 802, that'll explain why. So here, excuse me, if I said 802, I meant 502. I'm going to have to cover in 802 as well. Here we go. Section 502, consultants. It says, the head of each agency, and we're talking, department-level positions like selective service, DOD, so otherwise delegated functions under this order, shall employ persons of outstanding experience and ability without compensation. I'm going to read this again. The head of each agency, otherwise delegated functions under this order. This is Section 502, titled Consultants. And this is delegated by the authority of the President. And they also cross-reference this in Section 710B, C, and Act 50, U.S. Code, applicable paragraph 2160B and C. So there are cross-references to this. This is not the only place this is in writing. But this is stunning. According to the President, his designees can employ persons of outstanding experience and ability without compensation, and to employ experts, consultants, or organizations. The authority is delegated in this section, may not be redelegated. Now, let's be real plain here. When you say without compensation, that's slave labor, gentlemen. There's no other way to interpret this.
Right.
This section, Section 502 of Executive Order 13603, allows the President, in fact, let me mention this too, in peacetime and times of national emergency. In other words, you don't have to even declare martial law to invoke 13603. In peacetime and times of national emergency, that's a quote from this executive order, he can employ persons of outstanding experience and ability without compensation. You remember when Alex Jones used to talk about the civilian inmate labor brigades and all that was coming?
Oh, yeah.
That's what this is.
All right. Now let me hit you with this, Dave. Now, because I remember this, and I know you've written about this, but if, to the casual listener out there, if they just search on the Internet, Executive Order 13603, it'll take them to a debunking website, Snopes.com, okay? And we all know who funds what Snopes is, the husband and wife debunking team, okay? But they categorically deny the veracity of what this is all about, citing, for example, Hot Air, the website Hot Air, citing the website Outside the Beltway, saying that the timing of this release with respect to Hot Air, now the timing of this release might look a little strange, but this is really nothing to worry about at all, and it's really a revision update, if you will, of defense practices going back to 1939 roughly, or thereabouts, or the early 20th century. But what you've read, they don't even address that at all. I just want to. I don't know if you ever saw that or if you had to deal with that.
Well, I don't even deal with those websites. I cite whitehouse.gov.
Right.
I go to the original source document for all my documentation on this.
Exactly.
So there's no question that this is from Obama, that every word in here that I just read is from the President. It has nothing to do with Snopes or any other debunking website. This is straight from the President's pen. There's no question what I'm talking about here. This is slave labor of American citizens. You see, remember, I go back to, and this is why I read Section 601 first, because it said the Secretary of Labor in coordination with the Secretary of Defense. See, they want to have a military draft for World War III, but they also get a civilian conscripted slave labor force under the Secretary of Labor.
Yeah.
That's why they've subdivided conscription now under two heads. Right now, selective service, is basically a defense operation. It's not when Obama says it's not. That's when it becomes a slave labor operation. That means this. They could send you, Doug, to one place to do work, and they could send your wife to another place to do work.
That's right.
You have no say in the matter. This is slave labor, folks. I've read this at least 100 times, and I think this has been out since 2011, and there's no other way to look at this. Now, I believe that what most people say, they mean. They're going to do it. This is why I believe we're in danger from Jade Helm. Jade Helm may not go live, Jade Helm 15, but Jade Helm 16 or Jade Helm 18 or 20 might. They're not allocating these kind of resources, men and material, if they're not going to make this activity go live someday. Well, the same thing is true here with 13603. They're not putting this into print because they had nothing better to do that day. Clearly, there is an intention behind these words. And the intention is you, if you survive what's coming, are going to be slave labor. You will go where they send you, and you will do what they tell you. This is even worse than what the Soviets did back in the 1950s when they would assign people to their jobs and assign them an apartment and so forth. And this is worse than that.
Yes, it is. Yes. No, I totally agree with you. Don't think for one moment, David, that I brought that up to question the veracity of it. It just, what amazes me is the unwillingness of people to take a look, to take people at their word, like you just said. I mean, they didn't create this just because they had nothing better to do. I mean, words mean things, orders mean things. They're done for purpose, and it's pretty clear to me. My goodness. Okay.
And I'll give you an example. I'm driving down the highway. It says 55, and there's a cop sitting off in the bushes with radar. The sign means 55, and that cop is going to separate you from some of your money if he catches you going over 55. The 55 was written on the speed limit sign because there was intention behind it. It's no different than 13603. There is intention to turn many people in this country into slave labor.
Amen.
And they already sanctioned it. I mean, come on, this shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody. You've got Walmart in conjunction with Jade Helm, big DOD operation with Walmart involved with Jade Helm. And what do we know about Walmart? Well, at Walmart, and this was covered in an HBO documentary a decade ago, Walmart, when they moved their factory into an area in China, they required the workers live in a local dorm, even though they have homes in the area. And the cost of the dorm, which are horrible living conditions, but the cost of the dorm exceeds the amount that these people are paid. And if they leave, they have to pay it back. If they stay and work, they don't have to pay it back. So that's slave labor.
Yeah.
That's slave labor. And our government lets Walmart get away with this. We talk about human rights violations and how we need to be on the side of human rights, and it's a bunch of nonsense. Walmart, Nike, kids don't go to school. They work for 10 cents a day, as young as 10 years of age. They can't leave the assembly line unless it's their scheduled break, so they defecate and urinate on themselves so they can keep their job. I'm not making this stuff up, guys. It's all been in print. It's all been validated, and our government's just fine with that, and they let these people into these free trade agreements bring these products back into the country and undersell American manufacturers at the cost of slave labor. So if the government sanctions this with regard to foreign trade and this trade imbalance we're suffering under, then why should anyone be surprised under 13603 that they want to turn you into a slave?
And that's exactly what's going to happen. Steve Quayle's spoken about this many times. We are going to be the ones that are going to be engaged in the slave labor. I mean, that's the intent here, of course, to take away the assault on the middle class, removing the middle class, and any semblance of freedom that we've got. We're going to be the ones making the junk for for the rest of the world. I mean, that's the intent, is to enslave us, those who are productive, and of course those who are not productive. Well, we don't have much of a future here, do we?
No, I was just thinking this as you were speaking. I believe very much in having purpose in life. And when my life no longer serves my Lord and I no longer have a purpose on this earth, it's time for the Lord to take me. And I will not go to a slave labor camp and engage in the manufacture of goods that I know are going to be used to harm people. And that's what this will be all about. I will not. I'll forfeit my life before I do this. And I think of enough of us. Again, it's just like Gandhi. If you stop flying, they do away with the TSA. These people only get their power because they scare us, intimidate us, and we go along with them. We give them permission by our actions for them to do what they do to us.
Very well said. Very eloquently said. You're exactly correct. And do you think, I was wrestling with this. For example, it was a different topic, but we'll bring it back to the TSA. We'll bring it to what we're talking about here. Do you think, Dave, are there enough people who would be willing to not go to an NFL game or even a college game where there's TSA, or stop flying? Are there enough people out there willing to make that sacrifice right now?
Not enough.
All right. I wouldn't say not even close.
No, I hadn't been to an NFL game for a while, and I grew up, in the shadow of Mile High Stadium, was a Denver Bronco fan, and my dad and I used to go to a lot of games. Great memories I have of my father doing that. So, there was a time, when life was a little less busy, I used to go out and see the Broncos, and they'd play in San Diego, which is, an hour plane ride or a 6-hour drive. And, my wife suggested, God bless her, because she knows, my background. And she said, why don't we go out to San Diego for a weekend, see the Broncos play San Diego? And that's when I discovered this part of that article I read to you about the new NFL procedures. And I looked at it and go, heck no, we're not doing this. And it's just, but there's not enough of us who are saying no. I want everyone to listen to this very carefully. Do not go to a corporate restaurant to eat. Don't go to a chain store. Go to mom and pop. They're so glad to have you in there because their livelihood depends on it. You get these corporate employees, you get any kind of treatment, luck of the draw. But go to mom and pop stores, and if you have to eat out, that's where you eat out. And shop at your local stores. Don't shop at the corporate chains. You're feeding the beast when you do this. We could collapse the globalist economy from within. See, in my perfect world, and I'll tell you, God spoke to me through my spirit one night, because when I sit down to the computer, and I don't want to be too dramatic about this, but in my thought process is, thy will be done, guide me. What needs to be said, God? And I try to do my best. And one thing he communicated to me one night is the subject of passive resistance. God, holds violence in extreme disdain, as I do too. I find it abhorrent, only in self-defense.
Right.
And the way to break the system that we're in, the slave system that we're in, is not to participate. Martin Luther King captured a lot of this. Is a man I have great admiration for. And Martin Luther King, let's just lay down in the restaurants that won't serve us. Lay down on the streets, make them carry us off. And this passive resistance is the way to go. Now, if we engaged in trading and bartering, if we converted our useless soon-to-be cash into, gold, silver, and other products that we need, and we could form our own independent economy where we're only shopping local, we only deal with each other, and we ignore the corporations and the banks as best as we can, the system would begin to collapse on itself. And they would be in chaos. We'd be reading, oh, my God, the sky is falling, and that's all we'd see on CNN. And we'd look around and say, hey, life's pretty good for us. We don't see a problem here. And this is what America could do right now, is America could withdraw from this system and engage in our own private economy and not use their cash or use it as little as possible and we could make great headway in pushing this back. Unfortunately, I probably sound like a raving lunatic when I suggest this, to maybe someone in your listening audience. Certainly to the general public, they go, who is that nutcase? We need to lock him away for his own good. But I really believe this, guys. I really believe we need to be out of their system as much as possible. Isn't it also what Jesus said too? And don't be in the world. Don't subscribe to Julius Caesar. Don't subscribe to the evil Romans. Just be here, live your life, but don't be in their system. To me, I think there's biblical precedent for this.
I totally agree, and I know, Joe, you do as well. And I think, I think it's just good business. It's just good sense, regardless. Your neighbor that owns the hardware store. I mean, I've got a friend who owns a local hardware store, and he tries everything that he's gone in there. He attempts to buy American, from American made things. Now, obviously, you can't be 100%, but the majority of items he has are American made items. Now, hey, if we would just shop at places like that, and as you said, the locally owned restaurants as opposed to the chains. And now the alternative argument to that is, well, you've got people working there that depend on, you've got your neighbors working there as waiters and waitresses and hostesses and house cooks, what have you. You're hurting them.
That's like saying, you don't fly because the TSA is there, but TSA needs work.
Yeah,
I mean,
I get that.
You know what?
Yeah.
I don't buy that reasoning, and I'll tell you why. First of all, when you make your own bed, you got to lay in it. That's the first thing I would answer to that. And secondly, I talked about having a purposeful life. If your purpose in life is to commit second-degree sexual assault against the flying public, your life doesn't have much purpose.
Amen to that.
You need to find something else to do. And if you're serving an unholy and ungodly master and your profession doesn't honor God in some fashion, you need to go do something else. Otherwise, you will have wasted your life. And you know what they say about the brown shirts, too. Those who serve the dictators end up being the second group of victims. And that's what some of these people are sadly going to learn. And Steve Quayle refers to it as the blue list. And right. I totally agree. I mean, the history is true. You kill the dissidents with your death squads, and then you kill the killers. SEAL Team 6, we see a modern-day example of that.
I got an email the other day about SEAL Team 6, and of course we've interviewed Mr. Strange on. We've had him on. Lost his son in that disaster.
Yeah,
Charles Strange, right? We've interviewed him. Going back in history, and I know you've written about this prolifically. You've looked into it. Just the cover-up of the raid. I mean, what was your conclusion? If we can address that momentarily here or briefly here, what was your conclusion to that?
My conclusion is Osama bin Laden had been long dead, and they might have killed an imposter, and SEAL Team 6 wasn't fooled, so they had to wipe out SEAL Team 6. That's a real popular theory. It's the one to me that makes the most sense, but at the end of the day, Doug, I don't really have any hard and fast proof.
Yeah, and that's the trouble. I mean, there is some reasoned speculation there, and of course, some oddities.
I agree with what Dave said.
I do too.
Just from what we know, I don't believe first and foremost that Osama bin Laden was killed on a raid on a Pakistani compound, nor do I believe he was even alive. But even if he was alive, that definitely, in my opinion, was not him.
Well, and they have come out, and I'm not sure how many listeners know this, but they have come out and verified that is the White House. They verified that the picture taken, that famous picture with Hillary with her hand over her mouth or whatever it was, or everyone looking at the monitors. That was actually a staged picture. They verified that, and that's what people were saying from the beginning, like Dave Hodges and Alex Jones and others. So, I mean, if they stage that, then I mean, if the deception's there at that level, well, what does that tell you?
Well, the thing that got my attention was this: when they didn't produce a body. And what was the cockamamie story they told? That in deference to Arab tradition, we dumped the body in the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
Are you kidding me? Well, what should have happened was this: is that we kill our enemies. Let's assume 9/11 is what the government called it. We all know it's not, but let's assume for the sake of argument. So you have 3,000 Americans that are killed, and we've lost the Constitution since 9/11. And so we kill the man who supposedly is responsible. The prudent thing to do as a head of state is you bring the body back, you do the forensics, you guarantee it's him, and then you return the body for burial to the family. And you say, oh, that would be impossible to do. Really? Then why is it after 9/11 that President Bush had dinner with Osama bin Laden's family? That's been well documented.
Sure. Exactly.
So don't tell me that can't be done. It can be done. And it should have been done. And the American people should have been satisfied this is Osama bin Laden, but instead, we kill an imposter, so we dump the body in the ocean and we tell this cockamamie story that no one believes.
Right. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I agree. This whole it's well, hey, the Gambinos dumping in the East River. I don't know. That's kind of reminiscent of that whole bin Laden deal.
And I remember when that first happened. They came on the news and announced the death and the burial before. I mean, we got all that information at once, and then they had this information about a DNA testing that was going to be done, and the information was going to be released. I don't ever remember any of that information being released, but
it wasn't done.
Yeah.
I remember I used to broadcast at our other home in Central Phoenix, and I was there after a show, and my sister-in-law had popped in, and she got the news, and God love her, she turned out "I'm proud to be an American," playing at the top of the speaker amp volume, parading around, and I turned the sound down, and I said, "Do you really think this is true?" And she goes, "It's not." She knows about my show, obviously, and she said, "It's not?" And I said, "No, it's not. This isn't even believable." And we talked it out for 30 seconds, and she goes, "Yeah, I think you're right." If the average person could just sit down and think for a second, they would see through all the garbage that's out there. I mean, let's just look at the inflation rate. And I know this is really going out in left field, but just to show you, people say, "Hey, guys, the economy's on the rebound. Inflation's only 5%. Unemployment's only 5%. Let's talk about those two figures for a second. First of all, when they figure the inflation rate, they don't count gasoline or food like you don't have to eat or drive to work. I mean, come on. You've got to be kidding me. We are a petroleum-based economy. We have 3,000-mile salads. People commute an average of 25 to 30 minutes a day, and you're not going to count the price of gas and inflation? And we got to eat to survive. I mean, it's crazy. That right there disqualifies the inflation figure from even being seriously considered. And then you go to the unemployment figure. If you're a teacher who has a certificate, if you're a beautician who has a hairdresser license, if you're anybody that has anything like a real estate agent, has a real estate license, it's presumed that you're employed. Whether you made a nickel or not, they presume you're employed. And you go off unemployment after 6 months, it's presumed you have a job. How can you trust figures that are calculated in that fashion? But the average American looks at that and goes, "Yeah, by golly, look, the economy's on the rebound." No, it's not. I've had John Williams on from Shadow Stats. What a great site that is. You want to know what the economy's doing? Go to Shadow Stats. I've also had Joseph Meyer on, who's a terrific guest, and had him on, one of the leading economists out there. And they'll tell you, the government's just full of crap. You can't believe a word they say. The real unemployment, the under and unemployment rate in this country, guys, is around 25%. People who aren't working full-time, a lot of that's due to Obamacare, and unemployment combined, that's about 23 to 25%. The real inflation rate somewhere between about 13 to 15%. And all you got to do, ask the housewives. Husbands, ask your wives, how much are they paying for eggs these days? Yeah? No, get a little different story than what the government's telling you, don't you?
Yeah.
So they lie about everything. And okay, they lie. Governments lie. We know that. They've lied since the dawn of time. All right, but what's sad and distressing is the average person won't give them the sense that God gave them to actually see through these lies that are so transparent. That's frustrating.
And I was reading recently about the minimum wage and the history of the minimum wage, and I believe when they started it, it was 25 cents an hour, and it was just a recent article, and they calculated that the 25 cents today would be about $17.50 if the minimum wage, per inflation that we see today. So, I mean, that's $10 less than what minimum wage is today, if I remember correctly.
I've heard that same comparison. I don't remember if it was Joe Meyer that told me that, but one of my guests had told me that too. But, I don't even believe in minimum wage. I believe in job protection in terms of, you got to have a safe working place. It's got to have a fire escape, proper ventilation, reasonable work hours, good condition, that kind of thing. I believe in that. But the minimum wage, I'm not a believer in. I don't subscribe to it because all you're doing is upping the basement. You're elevating the basement. You're always going to have your bottom feeders in the economy, and that's your minimum wage. Well, if you up the minimum wage, then what you do, and the government loves this, because when you up the minimum wage, what does everybody else on the ladder want to do? Hey, look, we can't have minimum wage guys making more than me. I need a raise. And it has a ripple effect right to the top of the economy. But what's the side effect to this is you get in the tax code what's referred to as bracket creep. So you move up to a higher percentage and you're paying more in taxes, which negates your raise, but also serves to fatten the coffers of the government, who in turn spends the money on the projects of the special interests, namely the military-industrial complex. It's just a game. If you want more tax money out of the people, simply raise the minimum wage. Wait a couple of years, and you'll have a lot more revenue than you had before. People won't work for nothing unless they're forced. So, the market will bear what the minimum wage is. Well, wait a minute. Why should I serve a hamburger here for $2 an hour when I can walk across the street? They're paying me $7.50 an hour. That's what would determine what minimum wage should be. And if we did it that way, we wouldn't have the bracket creep in our tax code that we see. So this is so transparent. It's just basic Econ 101. And my frustration is how few people see through this, because it is so transparent, guys. It's just, like I said, about 10% of the country, in my estimation, is awake, alert, and intelligently understanding the issues. Wow. And the other 90% to various degrees are watching Fox and CNN, where the Fox and Friends group refer to Jade Helm as Jed Helm, like Jed from the Beverly Hillbillies.
Yeah, I wanted to. I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to address that with you. You were sort of, I think it was you, really, maybe not by name, but you bore the brunt of some really nasty and really, backbiting kind of discussion about Jade Helm, and anyone thinking that Jade Helm is something bad for America, they're just conspiracy kooks and what have you. But Fox and Friends, people look at Fox and Friends or Fox News as being on the conservative side, supposedly. Yet, they can't even get that right. It cracked me up the other day when I saw the picture of Jed Clampett from the Beverly Hillbillies on one of the articles.
I put Jed Helm with a question mark with a picture of Jed Clampett. Yeah, and I'm thinking, okay, you're reporting on something, Fox and Friends. You don't even know what you're talking about. You can't even pronounce it correctly. And here's what they said. It's one thing to be ignorant on a subject. Okay, we've all had times we've gone on the air and we've had one of those brain aneurysms and we can't think and the knowledge jumps out of our head. That's happened to every one of us. And I could give them a pass on that, except they took Jed Helm and said that Alex Jones should be banned from the airwaves. I'm paraphrasing. He scares people. We need to stop him from broadcasting. He's talking about Jed Helm. And I just was shaking my head at this. That's why I made fun of Fox and Friends. If they would have just had the faux pas of the mispronunciation, I'd let it go. But then they had to go and attack Alex with both barrels and suggest that he be taken off the air. Well, I wrote to them. They didn't respond, and I signed Common Sense Show and all that. I said, it's interesting you want Alex Jones taken off the air because he scares people. How about being taken off the air because you're so ignorant you can't even name the name of the drill?
Exactly.
It's just such a double standard. And then CNN's not even covering it. The Communist News Network, and occasionally I watch them just to see what the enemy's up to. But it's unbelievable. We could do a whole show just on the media. I read an article yesterday. There's a guy here, he's a columnist in Phoenix. He writes for the Arizona Republic, which is a total globalist mouthpiece. And if you know the history of Arizona, we're an extremely conservative state. I mean, we have guns on every corner and probably more guns than people. And, we believe in the law of the Old West, and we believe sheriffs should yield their power, and we don't like federal tyranny. And that's a good number of people here in Arizona. Yet we've got this newspaper that I've watched in the 30 years that I've lived here make an amazing transformation from being extremely conservative to just being a liberal mouthpiece rag. But they have this columnist named E.J. Montini, and what a piece of work this guy is. He was writing yesterday, and I forget the title, but it was something like this. The anti-vaccine group needs to be quarantined and banned. Now, he may not have used exactly those words, but that was effectively what he meant. And he went on to say that your right as a parent and your spiritual rights for your family do not supersede the health of another child. And not one time did he was basically saying all vaccines are created equal. And I wanted to punch my son's pediatrician when he wanted to give him a Gardasil shot at the age of 11. But, you look at this, guys, and he went on to make this statement. He went on to say, no medical treatment comes without risk, but we need to take the health of everyone into consideration. Okay, so you're admitting there are side effects, but you won't talk about, treatment etiology in terms of the effectiveness rate versus the contraindication rate, which are the side effects. And he admits in there are side effects, but he just glossed over it like it was no big deal. It's your duty to subject your kid to vaccines that might harm them, that have aluminum and all these other products in it that we know. And this was front page on Section B. It's called the Valley and State section here, which is really, covers our local news. And it was front page editorial news. And if you weren't in line with the vaccines, you need to be, and we need to pass California's law, where there are no exemptions from the vaccines. This is just total tyranny. We don't care about side effects. We don't care about treatment effectiveness. I wrote to E.J. Montini, and I said, so how much illness do vaccines prevent? And is the MMR vaccine the same as a vaccine, say, for hepatitis B? Does it have the same success rate? And what about the side effects of various vaccines? And how about the rapid rise in autism rates, where it used to be 1 in 10,000 for males, and now it's 1 in 53? Do you think vaccines have anything to do with that? And if so, why aren't you reporting on these rates rather than saying all vaccines are created equal and the side effects be damned? I'm waiting for an answer.
That was my question. Did you get a response? I figured not. No, because the level of research and information that is provided by these globalist mouthpieces is so shallow that they're nothing more than sound bites or print bites, if you will, in the newspaper, just to catch the limited attention of Americans, and really people don't think this through. And Ted Broer even is we have a sound clip with him. Medical martial law, that's one of the objectives here is medical martial law. I mean, Dave, you asked me on Sunday, and I remember this. What I thought would be the most pressing threats in America right now, and I gave you several, but you make a good point with the vaccines. It's a slow kill, and if you don't comply, ultimately with the forced vaccinations, didn't California? They just passed this law where it's mandatory now, where vaccinations are mandatory on children, correct?
Yeah, if you want to attend school, you have to have your vaccines. So you know what the answer is? Again, let's go back to the Hodges rule of non-participation. Homeschool your kid.
There you go. But then people say, well, I work during the day, I can't. We've got to...
There are coalitions that will do it with you. And they won't ask your kid to be vaccinated.
There you go.
So you can actually it's almost like the one-room schoolhouse.
Right.
And homeschooling's not large here in Arizona, but it's large enough. I've seen a pattern. And you'll have 4 or 5 families, and they alternate. And the families play different roles in this. And their kids' test scores are generally phenomenal. They score the highest of all the groups.
I'm for that. And that way you're not your children or your grandchildren, listeners, are not indoctrinated as well into this re-education, this redefining morality, whether it be the homosexual agenda. And I just learned from Wikipedia today, doing some research, if we say homosexual agenda, that's a pejorative statement. Okay.
No, it's not. There is an agenda. Remember I forget what they called themselves now. Well, gay pride was one term that comes to mind. There's another one that escapes my imagination. But, you mentioned real quick, I want to go back to what you said about medical martial law. Katie Whalen had a great piece on my show a few weeks ago. And Katie's our health reporter for the Common Sense Show. And she talked about the effects that the TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, is going to have on healthcare decisions. And you want to talk about setting up a scenario that shortens the lifespan? Katie covered it all. And so she and Ted are right on the same page with this. We are going into medical martial law. And I just say withdraw from the system. Totally withdraw from the... Again, you do not have to play these games. You're giving them too much darn power.
Yeah, I agree. There's no excuse for us not to do this. There comes a point in time when we have to, and I don't mean to be on a soapbox here, but I think there comes a moment in time when we have to say we will not participate, even at the risk of becoming classified as criminals. Essentially, we already are classified as terrorists anyway, potential terrorists, but at some point we have to say, no, we're not going to participate, we're not going to comply, we have to put our foot down. Civil disobedience is the way to go. Or, kind of short of that is what you're suggesting in terms of, getting into a homeschool situation, getting out of the system. But how long are we going to have on that, Dave? I mean, seriously, things are happening so fast.
I think homeschooling has a limited shelf life, and there was a case, and I don't remember all the finite details, but I want to say it was a couple of years ago, where a family left Germany because they were being persecuted for homeschooling their kids where it's illegal. And they came to the United States, and they sought asylum under political refugee status. Now, it's funny, we'll bring in 9,000 Syrians and not vet them, and some of them are undoubtedly going to be terrorists with hostile intent. But we have a family that's legitimately running from family persecution from the German government. And what they did is the German government took this family into court, and the American courts ruled you got to go back, and they put the dad in jail, and the kid was forced to go back into public school. I believe that's where we're headed towards. The courts have already shown their intention on this. They've drawn their line in the sand, and they've said if we have these homeschool laws that are passed outlawing homeschool, the courts are going to come down on the side of the legislature. So I do think this has a limited shelf life. But again, I say there comes a time when the government won't allow you to not participate, and they make non-participation a crime, then you got to be prepared to do what you got to do. The government does not own your children. You do. You have responsibility for your children and raising them the right way. And if that means you got to go to jail, then so be it. I mean, that's what a real parent would do, and not acquiesce to the authority of the government. And if you had enough people to do it, you know, they'd probably go Bill Ayers fashion and build a fence around the country and call it a prison. But I think we ought to make them do that.
I totally agree with you. You know,
but there is a catch-22 to what I'm saying. As Bill Ayers said, you know, in 1968, you know, incarcerate 50 million and kill 25 million. I think that's probably what they'll try to do to the non-participators. I don't think we're going to get out of this without a civil war is what I'm saying. And this kind of leads into a broader topic. There is going to come a time in this country when the American people as a group are aroused sufficiently where they're going to go, I'm not doing that. And I do think, you know, the sheep will grow a backbone. And then they'll criminalize non-participation. And I think that's where the real fun will start. And the question is, will American soldiers fire on American citizens? Will American soldiers exterminate in death camps American citizens? And I think initially there's a good chance of that. I mean, Kent State, you know, case in point. But I do think there's a point when American soldiers are going to say, and their commanders are going to say, we're not going along with this now. We're absolutely not going to go along with this. Now, what is hanging over the head of the American military? Well, we are at a couple of disadvantages. One, most of our combat troops are in Afghanistan. Number two, the president has reduced our military force to pre-World War II levels, and he's in the process of doing that now, even though Russia and China have threatened to nuke us on multiple occasions.
Right.
And we have a large military presence in this country of foreign troops. And I think that's the breeding ground for civil war. And, of course, let's not forget that 2 years ago it became discovered that Homeland Security purchased 2,700 armored personnel carriers and over 2 billion rounds of hollow point ammunition. And clearly they're not going to be going to Afghanistan to fight. So who are they prepared to fight against? The American people. And if you were to ask me to make a prognostication, and I don't give dates, but I think the events are lining up to where this scenario is going to play out. And I think the American military could resist. Now, here's your trump card. If World War III starts and the military is in a war for its own survival, that might circumvent the Civil War. Civil War could be replaced by World War III. And I'm real worried about that. As you know, I wrote about that over the weekend. Yes. And I talked about a three-pronged Russian attack. And all I did was take news releases, Sputnik News, Russian news sources, American news sources. They collaborated a lot of what my military sources tell me. And what I came up with is something to me that is just so clear that I had to write about it. And it's that if Russia invades the United States, one, they have fifth-column forces in this country that are already here. And I've grown weary of having the debate. I've documented the FEMA Russian ministry bilateral agreement from 2011 that permitted the first 15,000 Russian soldiers to come to America. I published Sherry Wilcox's video of Russian soldiers in uniform in DHS vehicles in Tennessee and in Kentucky. I have published all these eyewitness accounts, some with pictures of Russian soldiers that are here from Alaska to Florida. I'm tired of having the debate. They are here. There are Chinese that are here. And these people are here as part of an international force. They'll fly under the UN flag. This is why we're seeing all the UN vehicles being moved around the country, and I've published those photos as well, too. And we're going to see if the American military won't go along with the subjugation coming out of Jane Helm, we're going to see foreigners come in and jump into the act. And that's where we could see a civil war. I think it's possible. But back to the Russian invasion, you've got a fifth-column force that's been permitted by Obama who's a traitor. And people say, well, can you prove that? Well, let me give you another way we can prove Obama's a traitor. We have a well-documented source and documents from Judicial Watch that show ISIS base camps, particularly the one near El Paso. And Obama does nothing about it. They're right on our doorstep. They do nothing about it. But yet he's willing to chase ISIS into Syria and risk Russian intervention and the Third World War. He lets Russian soldiers come in after Putin has threatened to nuke us no less than 5 times since the advent of Syrian conflict and the conflict over the petrodollar and Iran selling, oil for gold. This man's a traitor. He's let the Alaskan defenses down. There's your first prong of the attack. It'll come through the Bering Strait, across the ice bridge. Also, he gave away 7 oil-rich islands to the Russians back in 2010, 2 of which can be used to launch an invasion of Alaska. So I think we'd see a multi-pronged invasion of Alaska. He suspended the F-22 flights over the coastal lines of Alaska, and they cited oxygen uptake problems for the pilots. I agree with that. That did occur, but he should have replaced them. The president should have replaced these with F-16s or F-35s, and he didn't. They've cut back dramatically, according to my military sources, on submarine patrols in Alaska. In other words, Alaska has been left defenseless. So we have that to be worried about. The second prong will come out of the North Pole, and if you ever played a game as a kid on the playground, King of the Hill, Captain Flag, all that stuff, you learn the importance of occupying the high ground. And if you look at a map of the North Pole, they can strike into Scandinavia and come down into Europe, and I'm talking about the Russian forces that are there. They can also come down through Canada, meet very little resistance until they get down near the American border, and you encounter major Canadian cities, and there's your second prong attack, and the Russians are militarizing the North Pole like there's no tomorrow. Part of the motivation is the North Pole, because the pole has gone through a slight shift, it's exposed these vast natural resources from oil to gold, silver, diamonds, and so forth. So the Russians have jumped into this in a big way, and Scandinavia is scared to death about being invaded. And the United States should be. That's your second prong. But the most dangerous prong, because I think Alaska and the Canadian invasion out of the North Pole are almost more of distractions to tie up American military response. The major thrust is going to occur with the Latin American nations in a Red Dawn scenario. And I'm not just saying this because, 2 versions of Red Dawn came out and they said that's what was going to happen. Obama has allowed the Latin American states to turn against the United States. He's actually engaged in economic policies to make them our enemies. And who is waiting to pick up the pieces? Putin. And Putin has formed, and I wrote an article about this over the weekend, he's formed alliances with Brazil, obviously the BRIC nations, but militarily. The Russians and the Brazilians are involved in space war technology now. You've got the Nicaraguans. They're accepting Russian airplanes, and their backfire bombers are 800 miles from Houston. You get the idea. And then you've got Panama and Ecuador and Peru. And I could go down the list. There's no less than Cuba. If JFK was alive today, we would have another Cuban Missile Crisis because the Russians have spy ships there, and they've been moving crates in undercover, and I believe they're nuclear missiles, and so do a lot of other people. So you've got all these Latin American states, and this is how bad it got. They had a meeting last year with 33 nations in Latin American states, the American states, and they did not invite Canada or the United States. And so Putin has managed to militarize and align all these Latin American nations against the United States. Now, this is where it gets really kind of spooky. So they move up through Central America, and they come out of Cuba, I believe, in a flotilla formation and invade the southeast. But the main thrust is going to be through the American Southwest. Now, the one saving grace the United States military has, it has superior military power than what could be amassed with Russian aid in Latin America, or so I thought. There was an event on the Mexican border in Arizona that changed my thinking, only because I've got good insider sources, and I ran this by Steve Quayle, what I'm about to reveal here on this show. And Steve said he was aware of the technology. And let me explain to you, aware of the technology. I have referenced no less than 3 times tonight the ISIS base camp near El Paso. There are also 3 other ones that I have been told about by reliable sources. And I'm going to really mince my words here because if I mention agencies or so forth, their identities could be discovered. But their reports are very similar to Judicial Watch. There's nothing extraordinary about the report except there's more than one. And one of them borders Douglas, Arizona. Douglas, Arizona is a border town with Mexico. A week ago tomorrow I believe it was, an F-16 was not shot down. It crashed near the Mexican border. And I'm thinking, well, that's interesting. And then they announced it was a brigadier general from Iraq. And I thought, oh, isn't that interesting? Because, Iraq and ISIS are having this big conflict over in Iraq. So I thought, well, that's an interesting coincidence. And then I saw the news accounts here, local CBS affiliate. Occasionally I'll catch the news, again, just to see what the enemy's up to. And they said that they couldn't find the body of the pilot. And then the next day, on Thursday, they announced that, yeah, we found the pilot, and he was still in his seat attached to the airplane, and his body was charred and died on impact. And I'm thinking, isn't that interesting? Now, I learned from someone on the inside, and then my best military source knew other people on the inside, and that told him the same thing that I got a tip from someone operating out of Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, where that F-16 originated from, and they contacted me and used, they said, a first-time email from a different server, all the precautions, and says, you need to know this is what's going on, that pilot didn't have a chance to eject. And that pilot did not eject because it was hit with a local EMP weapon that totally fried all the controls in the plane. This is why there was no Mayday call. And then I was told the radar showed that this plane just flat dropped from the sky. It didn't have a crash descent. It just dropped. It just stopped running and dropped. Now, what I've been able to find out about these weapons, and I knew nothing about these weapons specifically, but I documented when I wrote the article on this that Russia sold similar weapons to North Korea back in 2014. So they exist, and the Russians are in this business. And this really gets scary for me because this is what I think this is where this is going to lead. I think this was a beta test, and I believe you had ISIS personnel operating a localized Russian EMP weapon that can read through satellite connections. So in other words, they uplink to satellite, a Russian satellite, and they could read the heat signature of the plane, and they knew they had an F-16, and they launched the weapon against it, fried the electronics, and made the plane crash. Now, how does that play into the Red Dawn scenario? Well, if America has a superior firepower, but you have fifth column insurgency forces with ISIS that could bring down a fair number of American airplanes, and we also know that the Russians are, storehousing, planes in Latin America and their newfound allies. You might tip the balance of power to where an advancing army may get the tactical air support that it needs to invade the American Southwest and then branch out from there. That's where I think this is headed. Now, people say, well, you're kind of out there on this. Well, let's trace the chain of custody here, okay? You've got ISIS in the Judicial Watch report with Mexican government documents that show they're involved in the Sinaloa cartel. And this is work I did last summer with a DEA informant. And let's trace the Sinaloas. They go back to the Sanchez Paredes drug cartel in Peru, which is the largest one in the world, and they're the largest arms shippers and they're the largest drug dealers. And who are their best customers and who are they a conduit for with both weapons and drugs? Well, groups like the Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas, and Hezbollah. In fact, I found a federal document as well from 2007 and a Tucson Police Department memo from 2010 that linked the Mexican drug cartels to Hamas and Hezbollah. Well, where does Russia enter into this? See, this is the Red Dawn part of it. Russia uses Hamas and Hezbollah to run guns to the Assad government so they can fight against the CIA-backed Syrian rebels. So when you follow this chain of custody, and oh, by the way, just as an aside, who runs finance and arms shipments for the Muslim Brotherhood? Malik Obama, the president's half-brother, and he has never disavowed his half-brother's actions. In fact, I've got pictures of them together. There's never been a disavowing of his half-brother's actions. And this is why I believe that ISIS will soon be in possession, if they're not already, of these localized EMP weapons. And when I was talking to Steve Quayle about this yesterday morning, I said, were you aware of this? And he goes, oh, yeah. He said, and there's a big space-based warfare going on right now. They're trying to kill each other's satellites just because of this kind of thing. And I think this is what America is looking at with World War III. People think that we can't be invaded. And by the way, when I printed this article, here's what I got. We have 300 million handguns. There'll be an American behind every blade of grass. Okay, keep thinking that, because that's not going to turn the tide on what could be coming. And do I lose sleep over this? Yeah, there's nowhere to run or hide when this happens. You know, and to the people of Baltimore and Ferguson, you think it's funny to get out in the streets and burn down businesses in your own neighborhood because of some perceived racial injustice. When the Chinese and Russian tanks roll down your street, they're not going to view black people, white people, Jewish people, Christian people any differently. They think you're an American.
Wow. We lost you there for a second.
You cut out there for a second. That's kind of strange.
That's surprising.
Oh, boy, isn't that interesting? How long did you lose me for?
Just maybe a second or two.
Yeah. Not long enough to get our attention there with respect to the wigging out there for a moment. But
ISIS, I was reading today Iraqi war stories from even the Gulf War until the 2003 insurgency. And Obama spoke yesterday saying that they're going to continue to give weapons to the moderate Syrian rebels, which, these moderates are yet to be found anywhere. There was Obama saying, we're going to continue to train the ISIS terrorists, and I think he misspoke that if you check the email I have.
I saw that, yeah.
But, if there really was a U.S. effort against these ISIS troops, wherever they were, in Iraq or in Syria, I mean, we would be seeing this on TV, we would be seeing these airstrikes that they talk about. They would be parading this stuff all around us, but we're not seeing any of this. We're not even seeing the effort being put into it. So you have to ask the question, what is really going on? Who are we behind? Who are we backing as a country? And it's these same people that they're claiming we're at war against.
We created
Obama said yesterday, you're not going to beat ISIS with guns. It's going to be ideas. I mean,
kind of insanity is that?
It's crazy.
What are you going to do? Say I have this idea that you're not going to behead me?
I know. It's I can't wrap my mind around it either. I read a comment. Somebody said, "Well, put all your notebooks with ideas on it and take them in your backpacks and go head overseas, and that'll scare them." I don't get it. But they're saying that they can win with ideas, yet they're still shipping guns with tax money to these people.
I had on Scott Bennett. I don't know if you guys have got the pleasure and privilege of interviewing that American hero, but Scott Bennett was an Army Special Operations officer, and he discovered that the CIA was funding ISIS through Swiss bank accounts. He came on my show. He named names of people who were directly involved in these bank accounts. And it was easy for me to believe. Yeah, but you know how ISIS got started. It's when we abandoned Iraq, we also abandoned military equipment. By the way, if you're a military commander and you leave equipment behind and you had a choice and the enemy is able to use it, you're court-martialed. You could even go to prison for this. And yet we left this equipment behind by ISIS, and no one in the media even bats an eye like, oh, gee, that's just what happens, when this type of stuff is dealt with. No, it's not what happens. It was a total violation of every military regulation and procedure that we have. And then we find out the CIA is promoting this. You look at, the CIA doesn't work for America. They work for the New World Order.
Right.
Obama and Putin both work for the New World Order, and they're pushing us towards the inevitable. And the only path I see out of this, short of divine intervention, and I had this conversation with many people where many people think it's too late and we're going to go through our problems and all you can hope to get is divine intervention from the Lord. But short of divine intervention to save our country, and I don't think God would be of the mind to do that. After all, we've killed 60 million babies since the 70s, and gay marriage is legal. I mean, I could go on and on and on. We're clearly a nation under judgment. So the only hope we have from the physical realm, not the spiritual realm, but the physical realm, is for our military to rise up right now. But the military has told me, people in the military have told me, I've asked them, why haven't you had a military coup against this traitor? And they said no revolution ever succeeds without the popular support of the people, and too many people watch CNN. That's a quote from a former two-star general that I know.
Wow.
And, we almost had the coup with Benghazi, but see, it was a coup of opportunity, not necessarily a coup of long-term planning. As General Ham, the commander of AFRICOM at the time, and Admiral Guyette of Carrier Task Force 3 had all discovered from their intelligence that Ambassador Stevens was under attack, and they're going to go rescue him. But they also knew what Stevens was into. He was CIA. So, he helped overthrow and kill Gaddafi because he was raising money through gun trafficking, kid trafficking, and drug trafficking to fund, Al-Qaeda and all the other groups that were in Libya working against Gaddafi. And then he was doing the same thing in Syria. So word started to leak out before the 2012 election, and I had a couple of sources come to me, and both together, and said, you need to write this. And I said, I can't write this without proof. You need to write this. I can't write this without more proof. You need to write this or we'll never give you anything again. 2 weeks of going through this. Finally, in October, I wrote this, and basically what it was is Obama wanted these people dead because the word was leaking out, particularly from Ambassador Stevens, and this would have carried into the election. And they didn't want anything hanging out because Obama's election was not guaranteed at that point. And so Ham disobeyed Panetta. He was going to launch a rescue mission. Admiral Guyette disobeyed orders, and he had launched surveillance drones and weaponized drones and was going to use them. But before the rescue force could be sent to stop this, both men were arrested by their number twos that were also CIA plants that Obama had installed in key positions in the military for just such a purpose. Their plan was to grab Stevens and parade him out, and he'd know that he'd been set up for death. In fact, he knew it anyway. I mean, he had asked Hillary Clinton 3 times to increase his bodyguard contingent, and she refused. I mean, come on, like we can't afford the force? We can't take his bodyguard contingent from 4 men to 40 men? Like that's going to make a difference in the national security budget? Unbelievable. He knew he was a marked man, and he knew why. He knew they had to tie up loose ends. So he would have sung like a canary, and that's what Guyette and Ham were hoping, because remember, Obama was on the tear of firing every military officer seemingly he'd get his hands on.
Yep.
But it failed. See, it was a coup of opportunity. And so I was really hopeful after I learned about this. Oh, my gosh, the military is going to rise up against this despot, and they're going to take him out of office. And then it didn't happen, and more time happened, and it didn't happen. And you have more generals and admirals fired, and it still didn't happen. So I'm going to my sources. What's wrong with you guys? You came really close with Benghazi. Why aren't you doing something now? Answer, we don't have the support of the people.
Oh,
and
man.
And that's where we're and see, this is part of what drives me to be relentless. I don't turn down very many opportunities for interviews on smaller stations. I mean, anyone in their right mind would come on your show because you guys do such a great job, but you have such a huge audience. But I go on, if I just influence 5 people in an interview, I feel like I'm helping, because I'm trying to tip the balance here of people awake versus people asleep, because I know the military will not act until the people start to rise up. And I believe that the people rise up, that would give us our one opportunity. Now, we'd have one heck of a civil war in this country because these Russian forces are here just for this purpose. So this is the one thing that I think is the only thing in the physical realm that we have at our disposal is the military may come to our aid.
Well, and you make a good point there, and you also make just an excellent your July 4th report. Folks, go to thecommonsenseshow.com. That's thecommonsenseshow.com. In fact, I check thecommonsenseshow.com every day, every morning. It's my standard fare. But the July 4th report by Dave Hodges about Russia launching a 3-pronged invasion of the United States. Scroll down. I will read the whole article, but pay very close attention to the information contained with Ecuador, Venezuela, Bolivia, Brazil, El Salvador, and also the takedown of the American F-16. In the conclusions reached by Mr. Hodges, I think it's extremely important. This is a very fact-filled article, and you did a very great job, in my view, of explaining all of this, really, setting this up. Cuba as well. That bothers the heck out of me, seeing what's taking place with Cuba, even on the diplomatic side, under the pretense of normalizing relations with Cuba. What's going on there? Okay, but anyway, that's kind of getting off track. But I just wanted to really drive home the point, folks. If you have not read the article on thecommonsenseshow.com from July 4th, you got to read it. It's really a lot of great information in there. Dave, hold the thought for a minute here, folks. We're talking with a 5-star guest here, Dave Hodges from thecommonsenseshow.com. You can tune into his show every week, 8 o'clock, every Sunday, 8 o'clock. It's a great show. I'm a listener. We're listeners. The commonsenseshow.com, Dave Hodges website, show of the same name every Sunday. It's a fantastic show, and I know that on the 19th, Steve Quayle will be a guest on your show, and you've got we're
rerunning an interview that we did about 6 weeks ago, Doug. It was terrific this Sunday. People are going to want to listen to this because the information you put out was probably more timely today than it was at the time you put it out.
Yeah, I had a good time doing that interview. I was thinking back before you came on. I was thinking back to the time we spent together, and we just had a blast with you. You're always a gracious host, and certainly you bring out the best in your guests. But folks, rather in place of the break here, I just want to mention this. Go to AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com. We're talking about a whole bunch of stuff that will impact your survival. I mean, this is survival information that impacts your lifestyle, impacts your survival. Let's get prepared. AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com. They're our go-to company for all things survival related. By the way, we were told today that the Independence Day, 4th of July package, the $450 package that they had, they're all sold out. They're going to be shipping that package this weekend and in the next week. So just hang tight with that. You'll be getting your packages, but they're sold out of that. But that does not mean they're sold out of things like obviously the long-term storable freeze-dried food, the Thrive Express, many other packages there. Folks, AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com. Also, check out HealthMasters.com. They, too, have some tremendous sales, limited-time sales at HealthMasters.com. Dr. Ted Broer of HealthMasters.com. But I want to get that out of the way. I didn't want to take any more time away from our guest, who's gracious enough. Not that you don't have anything better to do, Dave. My goodness, you're a busy guy. You've got a lot of irons in the fire. But I think that this information is so important that you're getting out to the people, to our listeners. So many people that have requested to hear from you, and to especially here with Jade Helm. Really, we're on we're 2 weeks. Well, no, less than that. We're 8 days away from the start of Jade Helm, the official start of Jade Helm.
Yeah, July 15th.
I'm glad you said official, Doug, because I ran a video, March 27th, and it was in Fort Lauderdale. That's it. Sorry, it's been a while, and I'm trying to pull this up from the memory, but March 27th of this year, Fort Lauderdale, we see a dissident extraction drill, complete with helicopters, white vans, people parading across a crosswalk under armed guard with their hands up. It doesn't get any more clear than this. And so Jade Helm has been underway for a while. We have Jade Helm, big time was going on in April. In fact, we've had so many foreign troops in this country, it's hard to count. This is one that's going to catch you off guard. You're not. This is almost not believable. But I had information, and then I was able to document this in April. Around the middle to end of April, there was an 8-day drill done with Michigan Army reservists and National Guard members with Danish troops. Danish troops.
Okay.
That's just, I mean, does that strike you as odd as it struck me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Danish troops? But, you know, people need to know, if we have civil unrest in this country, both Mexico and Canada have signed an agreement that they'd send their troops in to help the government. And the UN has pledged their support. And, you know, Jade Helm could get really ugly. And as I said earlier in the show, I don't know if this Jade Helm will go live, but something like it will. Its successor, one of its successors, will go live. But, you know, I didn't get the chance, I've never talked to you about this. I had a story that I would never have let seen the light of day for my website, except I had confirmation of a lot of this stuff on the outside. I had a man named Marlon Brock who lives in Big Spring, Texas, not too far from Midland, and he asked me if I wanted him to go keep an eye on the Walmart. There are actually 2 Walmarts in Midland that have had suspicious activities. One of them is closed. And I said, sure, absolutely, I appreciate that. And he responded to one of those ads that I put that I mentioned earlier, you know, join the team of the Common Sense Show and tell us what you see and send us your pictures. He found some real notable events, and I'll return to his contribution in this. Now, in the meantime, this is the story I would never have run without some outside, verification. There was a man who wrote to me, would not use his name, and he called himself The Watcher. I kid you not, The Watcher. And I'm thinking, okay, this is a load of crap. And here's what he said. They came into the Walmart in Midland through a tunnel. He said they narrowed the front entrance down to, like, you couldn't get very far into the building without being single file, and they were installing a TSA-type security device. And he said they did the same thing with behind steel doors in the back of the Walmart. And he said, interesting thing, Dave, they've taken out every piece of shelving. And so he also said that his part in what he was doing was he was involved in redoing the ventilation system. Okay, now just keep those variables in mind, then I'll return to the extra things he told me. Marlon Brock, and I published these photos in an article, Marlon went to this Midland Walmart. He photographed people on the roof looking like they were redoing the ventilation system. He took 2 pictures of large trucks carrying out the shelving from this Walmart. Everything this guy was telling me in his first email, Marlon had photographed in some fashion. And I was thinking, oh, my goodness, okay, I'm going to run these 2 stories together because Marlon gives the photographic evidence for what this guy is largely telling me. Plus, Marlon also captured a photograph, and boy, was this interesting. He took a picture of a black truck, and the name just jumps out of my head, like the Central Intelligence Group or something like this. I'd have to go back and look it up. But it was a group that's headquartered out of Arkansas. It's a private security firm, and they're in 5 different states. And their website is the weirdest website, Doug, I've ever seen. I went to their website. Now, every website that wants to do, any kind of salesmanship would say, here are customers and testimonials, and we serve this many clients, and we've done this many jobs, and boy, aren't we great. They didn't have anything on there for self-promotion. The only thing they had on there was that they had served some kind of dessert to disadvantaged kids in the park. But then they went on to say, our customers are the federal government. And they mentioned some pretty highfalutin agencies that they said they were involved in. But they didn't put anything on there that would make you want to hire them, which tells me that the government goes to them to do some of their dirty work. And they were providing the security outside the Midland Walmart. And Marlon took pictures of this. Well, the guy on the inside, Mr. No Name, who called himself Watcher, was saying that he named the group. He named the same group. He said they were on the inside providing security, and it was strict. One of the things he said to me that really disturbed me, he said in the northeast corner of the store, he said they had huge black curtains that they put down, and it covered maybe 10% of the store. And none of those employees that were in there, he said they were all dressed in tan overalls, and he said not one of them was allowed to talk to any other worker on the inside. And they weren't allowed to take breaks when everyone else did. They took their breaks behind the curtain. And all the other people were told, you can't engage these people. You may not speak to them. And whatever they were working on greatly concerned him because he said it was so secret. Now, he's done jobs like this for the government, according to what he told me. And he said, most of our work's compartmentalized, and we don't really know the overall of what we're doing, but I've been reading your articles. And he says, it's helped me kind of put two and two together. And he says, remember, Dave, we are working on ventilation. Well, here Marlon Brock took those photos. And now you have people working quietly and secretly who can't interact with other people behind curtains. I hate to say this, guys, and I know this sounds crazy, but the first thing I thought of was gas chambers. I know that sounds nuts. But how do I know this guy was for real that was inside the Walmart? Well, Marlon Brooks' photos verified about 60% of what he told me.
The photos, by the way, folks, can be found at thecommonsenseshow.com. The article from June 2nd of this year, very simply just go through the previous articles, June 2nd, and then suggesting they close Walmarts or staging centers for FEMA camps. And see the photographs there. You'll see the emails from, or the photographs from Marlon Brock's photos, as well as the email from Watcher. Yeah, and the center, the agency you're talking about, security, is Central Defense Security.
There you go. That's it.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. Very interesting.
But yeah, these guys were on the inside, and they were the ones enforcing the no fraternization rule with these strange employees operating in secret. But he also said that they had replaced. The Watcher said this now. Now, Marlon would have no way of knowing this because he wasn't on the inside, but he said that they replaced the shelving with other kinds of shelving. And he said he wasn't sure what it could be used for. He said it could be used to handle heavy military equipment. That thought occurred to him. But he also said you put a mattress on it, it could have been bunk beds, rows and rows and rows of bunk beds. Wow. And he said he wasn't sure which one it was, but he said he thought it was one of the two. And this is what freaked him out. The fact that these guys, see, he said, one of the first things he said to me, I would never have written to you except for the fact that I know you'll understand what I'm telling you. And these guys are working in secret here, and it's very bizarre. I've never seen anything like it on any of the government jobs that we've been contracted for. He mentioned to me once he was involved about 5 years ago of sealing up caves on federal forest land. And he said, we thought the government had something in there they wanted to hide, but we didn't know. It was all compartmentalized. He said he'd never seen anything like this before. And then when the shelving's out, and he comes back in one day for his shift, and they brought these guys in on these little mining cars they have. He described them like mining cars, and they come along this track. And he said that they're forced to change clothes. They can have no electronics on them whatsoever, no iPods, no nothing, no cell phones, obviously. And their whole group almost got kicked out. He said one day a guy forgot and actually had the cell phone in his pocket. He wasn't trying to hide it, but they were so upset they threatened to send the whole group home. So they make them change clothes in these overalls, and they do their work. And when they're done, they have to leave the overalls there, and then they change back. So there's no chance of getting any contraband in or out and no way to take any pictures. And his story was convincing only because I could visualize it from the pictures I had. Taking the shell, let's keep in mind now, let's back up with Walmart for a second. Why did they close the Midland store? Well, for the same reason they said they closed the other 4 stores initially, because of plumbing problems. Well, what does shelving in a Walmart have to do with a plumbing problem?
Good question.
Yeah, I don't know. Nothing,
yeah,
really.
And I asked him, I said, the bathrooms. I said, how was that? He goes, we used them. There was nothing wrong with them. I'm not joking. I wrote that back to him. And he said, they used the bathrooms inside the Walmart. So that's not why they closed the Walmart. And they've completely retrofitted this Walmart for something. Now, I had a Texas Ranger write to me anonymously, and I believe him, because not only did he tell me stuff that made sense and fit in, he told me something word for word what a high-ranking officer in the Dallas Police Department told me. He said, we're worried about an ISIS incursion, and we're trying to harden militarily Texas. He said, we believe we're going to be invaded, and how big it's going to be and what the scope is, we're not sure. And I published that email he sent to me anonymously, although I know his rank. I left his rank out because I was afraid it would give him away. But let's put it this way. He wasn't a first-year Army Ranger. And he said a lot of the stuff that made sense with regard to Walmart. It could be a military supply depot, because we know that Walmart changed their logistics for supply and delivery to military specs several years ago so they could be converted in times of war. And so what the Army Ranger said, he says, don't look at the Walmart as FEMA detention centers. Look at them as military supply depots against an invasion into Texas. And I thought, okay, that makes sense, but I'm not sure. I really don't know.
Either way,
I don't know.
It ain't pretty either way.
No, I would rather it be a military operation because at least it's something wholesome designed to defend America.
True.
I'd prefer that over this is where we're going to process people. And so many of these places are along railroad track lines, and the images of World War II and Nazi Germany come up with the death camps. And this Walmart's no different. And there's just some bizarre stuff. And
but see, Dave, let me ask you a question though. Okay, when you bring that up about hardening, interior areas using Walmart. So let's say that Texas Ranger is 100% accurate. That this is absolutely what's going on here. Why are we even allowed? See, what I don't get, and help me understand this. Why are we allowing the ISIS encampments? I don't care if they're over into Mexico. I mean, look, we've got no problem bombing foreign countries. I mean, we don't have any problem with that at all. Surgical strikes. Yeah. So if let's assume for a moment, let's go with that narrative. Then why aren't we being more proactive with the ISIS, encampments and the potential for invasion right now? I mean,
well, what I've said earlier in the show and what I've said in writing is that Obama will risk war with Russia by chasing ISIS into Syria, and Russia said they'll defend Syria at all costs, but he won't cross 3 miles over the border and take care of a definitive threat.
Okay.
So, and of course we know the CIA supports ISIS, and we have a traitor at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, and I'm not using that term lightly. This man has done nothing to help the middle class. He's done everything to weaken the military at a time when we should be extremely worried. I mean, China's on the verge of passing up our naval prowess. Their submarine fleet is approaching our level. And what is he doing? Reducing our military to pre-World War II levels. And as I mentioned earlier, he's left Alaska defenseless. He's let the Latin American states align against the United States, so much so where they exclude us from their economic meetings. I could go on and on here. This man is an absolute and abject traitor. We have Russian ships and spy ships in Cuba, and what did Obama do? Normalize relations with them.
Yeah.
It just doesn't end. This man's a traitor. So help you understand the way you understand why Obama's not going after ISIS across the Mexican border. He's a traitor. They're going to serve a purpose.
Yeah. I have no problem understanding that. And of course, you know what gets me, and I say this so often, and I'm sure the regular listeners are going to start throwing stuff at their computers and stuff for me saying this again. But all of this could have been stopped with Obama's bona fides being verified and his constitutional lack of eligibility. We could have stopped this way back when, but we had media complicity. You had collusion with Boehner, and not Boehner, but collusion with the highest levels of government. You had good old John Brennan out there acting as a national security advisor for his campaign and being elevated to the CIA, and of course all kinds of stuff happening with his passport. But but we could have stopped this. We could have, or at least slowed it down. In some ways.
John McCain, 2008 campaign, and Larry Elder in that interview I recorded between Sean Hannity and Larry Elder, very telling interview. I couldn't believe this was mainstream media. I said, here you got Fox and ABC, both telling you Bill Ayers is a terrorist, and he launched the political career of Barack Obama. That's mainstream media, folks. Larry Elder broadcasts on ABC radio, and Sean Hannity is on Fox. And they're both saying this. And it even got worse because in the 2008 election, Larry Elder said this, and I'll quote. He said that John McCain was confronted with the fact that Bill Ayers was a terrorist. He launched Obama's political career. Why aren't you making a campaign issue out of this? And he says, why do I care about an old, washed-up terrorist? That's in that interview. If you go to my article yesterday and you see Sean Hannity, Larry Elder, you got to listen to this, folks. I mean, this is mainstream media saying exactly what Doug and Joe Hagmann and Dave Hodges are saying right here tonight, is that we are being sold out by a traitor, and a traitor with genocidal intentions, because that's the nature of the man who launched his political career.
That brings me up to something that I wanted to ask you about, and you're so gracious for being on with us for so long, Dave. I know you got to be exhausted, but let me ask you, remember, and maybe you can help me with this, remember the press in Russia, the media in Russia, when Barack Obama, I think it was before his Illinois Senate state election. I mean, he was an unknown, and we had there was somebody in Russia, in Russian media, saying, "Oh, Barack is going to be the next, the first black communist Marxist or communist Muslim president." I think it was a female. There was an account in the media. Didn't you and I speak about this, either on or off air at some point?
Yeah, we did, and there was a whole lot of complicity in this. It wasn't just the Russians. I mean, the Communist Party of the United States endorsed Barack Obama.
Right.
It's I was talking about Bill Ayers before Obama was elected, and no one wanted to deal with it.
Man.
I'll tell you who's lucky to be alive. Sarah Palin. Sarah Palin, she didn't get the memo. When she ran as the figurehead for women on McCain's ticket, Sarah Palin, you know what she called out? She said, there's going to be a revolution in Ukraine if Obama's elected. She predicted that, and she was right. And she said, my state's under threat of being invaded by Russia. And the media just vilified her. And now we know today that Alaska is basically defenseless from a military standpoint. Sarah Palin was right on so many issues. As time has gone on, I've really developed a respect for her. She's not some bubble-headed bimbo. I memean, this woman has a brain, and she was professional and she was good. And I think the reason that she's out of politics is she got told, if you want to live to see tomorrow, you shut up and stop talking.
Wow, I can believe that. I mean, it's certainly not.
She was actually thought she was supposed to do her job. Hey, I wanted to ask you a question too, Doug. I always laugh at this kind of report. Here it's July 4th, okay? So, Obama gets on the airways, says, Americans, go to your events, have your fun, but just be watchful, okay? See something, say something. And we have reports, according to the media, the FBI says there are 56 legitimate terrorist threats in the United States from ISIS. How do they know it's 56 and not 57? And if they know how many there are, then why haven't they moved to arrest people connected to this? I mean, the information had to come from somewhere. It wasn't written on the bathroom wall, I don't think.
Yeah. That's a great question. I saw that, and I was really thinking it would be 57, reminiscent of the McCarthy the story, the accounts. And by the way, just for the record, McCarthy was right. Okay, read Blacklisted by History by M. Stanton Evans, folks, if you have any questions about McCarthy and his investigations. But having said that, yeah, I that's a great question. And of course, my answer to that is simply this: there's this complicity that I see. I mean, it's a okay, hands off these terrorists here in this country. I believe that's the order, standing orders from the Department of Justice, Obama's Department of Justice, as well as the White House. So you've got and the State Department. I believe that to be the case. I mean, any one of these 56 or 57, or pick a number, any one of these incidents would certainly be a bonanza, in my view, for additional security encroachments against the American people. This is just my feeling. A dirty bomb going off in an unnamed Pennsylvania city. Don't forget the movement of the nuclear materials back in 2013. And then Guccifer coming out and saying, "Hey, there's going to be a potential nuclear attack." I mean, he was talking about a nuclear attack based on his hacking of certain government documents and memos, and of course they jailed him. But having said all of that, well, look what happened after Oklahoma City. The bonanza for the security state, the apparatus here, right after the Oklahoma City bombing, which I don't care what you say about it. I mean, what people say about it, there had to be some level of knowledge by our government. And following that incident, that horrific incident, you had the most draconian police state type of laws go into effect without any debate than any other time in history. So what would a nuclear explosion do, or a dirty bomb, or some sort of bio attack over the 4th of July holiday? What would that do? It would do a whole lot. Why didn't it happen? Look, I don't know. Maybe it wasn't the right time. Maybe, I don't know the answer to that question. But certainly
I think
it would be
a boogeyman effect. You
okay.
know, I remember when you go out to the stadiums and we frisk you and make you inconvenience you and make you uncomfortable, that it's all in the name of security. So,
oh yeah, yeah.
Boogeyman is always out there.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're always at war. We're always supposed to be fearful. I mean, this is the government talking, of course. It's a fight against the terrorists. Of course, we're not at war with Islam. It's an ISIS. Obama's statement about ISIS reminds me of an old Andy Griffith show. To lighten up here a little bit, an old episode of Andy Griffith, where Obama's saying, we have to fight this with ideology. We kind of engage them in something more constructive, if you will. And I'm paraphrasing that, but one of the old Andy Griffith shows, Barney was, I don't know, they had 3 or 4 prisoners, escaped prisoners, hardened prisoners, in Mayberry's cell, and Barney wanted to rehabilitate them. Give them something, it just reminded me of Obama, and he gave them like a leather working kit, one prisoner leather working kit, another one a metal crafting kit, and something. It was just a crazy episode, but together they used their rehab packages to break out of the prison. Break out of the jail cell. It was just kind of a funny thing, but it reminded me of that same mindset. It's ridiculous at its face with what we're through.
Rehab them with blade sharpening. Just send them to metallurgy school or something. This president, I thought George Bush was one of the worst I've ever seen. And, you're either with us or with the terrorists, and they hate us because of our freedoms. Remember that, George Bush?
Sure.
I mean, God, please bring George Bush back.
But don't you think he's got to know? He had to know in 2007 or 2008 when Obama came on the scene. He had to get the memo that Obama was, this is what I'm thinking, being in the loop. He had to know what Obama was about, don't you think?
I think you might be giving him too much credit. I think Daddy Bush knew, but I think he was just a doofus. People think that George Bush was intellectual. I'm talking about the latter one. He's not. He's not intellectual at all. Remember, the guy used to abuse drugs, and he was a happy-go-lucky party guy, and he was happy to be president. I mean, look how ill-prepared he was in his public speeches. And he'd go out and he'd defend managed care and the rip-off of managed care by saying things like, we need to make it possible for gynecologists to spread their love with their female patients. You might remember that quote. And he had somebody go, terrorists never think of ways to keep harming Americans, and neither do we. I mean, that was the George Bush. I thought, what a complete and absolute moron. And he did a lot of damage, yes. But he did damage because of the people that were in his cabinet. It was kind of like Jimmy Carter revisited. But you've got a situation here with Obama where this man is pure evil. He does know what's going on. And I know he's disengaged a lot according to the reports, but he knows exactly what's going on. He knows who he serves. And, the American people, too, and this is something, too, that really bothered me. He goes over and he meets the sheik and the prince of the Walla Walla guy of Saudi Arabia, and he bows to him.
Oh, yeah.
And that was before the second election he ran for, his re-election. Why would anyone vote for someone who bowed to a foreign political dignitary?
Wow, a good point. I think, I wrote about that too, because what the Saudis saw was the front portion of the bow. What the American people saw was the rear portion of that bow. And exactly. But you're right. This obviously was a nod to perhaps the foreign controllers. I mean, look at Benghazi. Or look at Arab Spring, to be more precise. I really believe Arab Spring was, well, not believe it. I mean, we can prove that Arab Spring was not spontaneous. It was drafted really in the bowels of Saudi mansions, and to really restructure the power within the Middle East between the United States, the French, and the British, and some other countries as well. But those were the three, and we were doing the Saudi bidding, and even today, I mean, we're by proxy, our American military is really an arm of the Saudi government, if you will. And our CIA intelligence is an arm of the Saudi government. So it's crazy what's taking place, but yet no one is really connecting the dots on this.
Well, I think people who keep up with this can see through this stuff pretty clearly. We're being marshaled towards our ultimate destruction, and the path is very clear and it's unmistakable, and we're being torn apart from without and from within. I mean, the moral structure of this country is reprehensible. And let me just say this off the top. I'm not without sin, and no one is. So I don't sit here in judgment of my neighbor. But if people expect me to legitimize and say, oh, yeah, God thinks that's okay, gay marriage, no, he doesn't. He calls it an abomination. The Bible speaks very clearly on the topic. Do I think we should deny jobs, incarcerate, bully? No, I don't. These people are going to be held accountable for their actions, as I will when we stand before our Maker. But to legitimize this process by gay marriage is one thing. But where the gay marriage thing is going is not the big threat. See, I don't view homosexuals as my enemy. I try not to think about the graphic nature of their behavior because that does bother me, cause me discomfort. But like I said, I don't believe in persecution, and I don't believe in judgment. Judgment is God's. But where this is leading is horrific. They have now extended homosexuality and gay marriage into defense of transgenderism. Now, I'm going to speak from my mental health background as a practitioner here. Back in the days when I was trained and practiced, this was called gender identity disorder. And by the way, you do not change your gender because you get your secondary sex characteristics changed. You don't change your DNA. change your hormonal levels much. It's just a facade. And what they're doing is using the homosexual movement and the gay marriage movement to legitimize a total perversion and total mental illness. And yes, if you're somebody who wants to change your sex, you have a few screws loose, and you probably could benefit from talking to someone. And I'm not ashamed to say that. That's not a pejorative, prejudicial comment. It's a mental health comment. But it's not going to stop there, Doug, because what's the next step? Even in the dark days of Rome, we never saw arguments endorsing bestiality, and that's been taken out of the military code of justice now, where it's no longer a crime. We didn't see arguments defending pedophilia. And you have that wonderful group, and I say that in quotes, called NAMBLA, the North American Man-Boy Love Association. And who gave $2 million to them? None other than globalist George Soros. That's where this is headed. The pedophilia, where they will victimize our young children for their own pleasures and legitimize it, make it legal. There's going to be a pedophilia lobby. Listen, if I'd have said 20 years ago, there's going to be gay marriage, and the White House is going to have rainbow colors in support of it, people have said, Hodges, you're nuts. You need to be taken away to a crazy house. Well, I'm telling you right now, it ain't going to be 20 years. It's coming in the near future. You're going to see strong arguments where you're going to have pedophiles being a lobby in this country. And all you have to do is look at recent sexual past practice history to know that I'm right.
Oh, you're absolutely right. 1987, I'm not even sure if people recall this. There was a homosexual march in Washington. And in 1987, the this lobby, if you will, put forth a series of demands that included and I'm quoting this, an anti-homophobic curriculum implemented in schools nationwide. But another, what you just mentioned there, normalizing reducing the age of consent to the point where it would be really
Doug, let me interrupt a second. NAMBLA's moniker saying, and this goes to your age of consent comment, its moniker saying is sex before 8 or it's too late. Are we Americans going to accept this?
That's crazy.
Accepted. Many are celebrating. Well, that's a good point. I mean, oh man.
You see, and let me be real clear here. I am not saying that people of the gay lifestyle are going to engage in pedophilia. My critics would take that and expand what I've said and use it to falsely attack me. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying, it's a bootstrap argument. It's from the gay movement to the transgender movement to the pedophilia movement. That's called bracket creep. And this is what we're going to see inch by inch. It's a cinch. And if you remember, just keep this in mind, your bankers, a lot of your top officials are Satanists. They don't worship God and Jesus. They worship Satan. And so should this surprise anybody?
That's a great point. And it's a great place to conclude, I think. It's unfortunately it's a good stopping point at this point. Dave, you've just been a tremendous guest. What a wealth of knowledge and what a huge amount of information, folks. I just hope that I know that the listeners gleaned a lot of information from tonight's interview. Dave's website, Dave Hodges is our guest, certainly a 5-star guest. His website is thecommonsenseshow.com. His show heard every Sunday night from from beginning at 8 o'clock, 8 to 11. Fantastic show, Eastern Time, that is. thecommonsenseshow.com. Prolific writer. I go to his website every day to check on new articles, and I suggest you do as well. Bookmark his website. Dave, any last words, comment, or that's a poor choice of words. Any closing comments?
Knowledge is useless without action behind it. And if the audience has heard anything that Doug or Joe or I have said that you said, yeah, that makes some sense, take action. Do something. Write a letter. Tell a neighbor. Do a sit-down protest. Do something, because we're running out of time. And if we get beyond this fall and into the Christmas season, I'm going to be surprised. I'm not making a prediction, but that's how short I think the time could be. When I wrote the article, I said the Russian invasion could come any time with Red Dawn. I mean that. It could come tomorrow, or it could come in 5 years. We're living on borrowed time with the economy. I think we're living on borrowed time with our military security. And I think that, people right now, you care about your families, and I know you do, and you care about the future of this country, and there are a lot of great things about America and Americans. Then we need to start acting, not just knowing, but take this knowledge and put it into action.
Wow. Great words of advice. And everyone, please, that's sage advice regardless of where you are in your belief in terms of what's going on, where you are. It's just sage advice. Dave, my friend, thank you so much. You are a gracious guest. Thank you so much for being part of our program tonight, especially on short notice. And my goodness.
Well, I owed you 1 times 10, so it's always my pleasure to come on this great show with your wonderful audience, because I hear from so many of them after I'm on, and you've got just great listeners, and I'm glad that the Common Sense Show and the Hagmann Hagmann Report are joining forces in so many different ways. I think the beneficiaries will be our listening audiences.
Amen, brother. And it's only we are going to come out fighting a lot stronger, a lot more efficiently, and really giving the globalist Satanist scumbags out there a run for their money. And I know that we're together on this. And thank you for tonight. Thank you, as always, for your kindness, for your generosity, and certainly for your extensive research. We really appreciate it. Dave, thank you so very much. God bless you.
Okay, thank you, guys. Take care.
Thanks, Dave.
Wow, what a great,
so much information in that show. In this show, I urge everybody who joined us later, go back and listen from the beginning. There was a lot said in this interview, and again, Dave's website, thecommonsenseshow.com. He will be out this week. They're going to replay an episode you were interviewed on a few weeks back, 4 or 5 weeks back. So that'll be good. And
that was a fun interview that we did.
Lots of energy from Dave. He, especially running on the lack of sleep he had at the beginning. He talked about a storm that caused him and his family to have to leave their house last night. And we'll keep him in our prayers, and we'll talk to him again soon. And you'll be hearing a lot of them here on Sunday nights when we start simulcasting his show. Not sure if we're going to start doing that this week or next week.
This week, I believe.
This week?
Yeah, this week. And there's some logistics we have to work out, or some issues we have to work out. But it's great when we can get the alternative media together, and when I say together, on the same interstate, traveling in the same direction, with communications and the same goals, and just to educate the people. I think it's great.
Tomorrow night,
Steve Quayle and
Dane Wingington, I think I pronounced that right, and Steve Quayle will be joining us. We'll be talking about chemtrails, bioengineering, geoengineering. I'm sorry.
I don't think you're too far off on bioengineering either.
No, it's getting crazy out there. This weather just is getting worse, and I got a message today. I don't know, just a little bit ago from one of our sources who works in the financial industry, and said there's something going on in the Chinese stock market. Stocks are way down over there, apparently. Over 54% of all Chinese stocks are down.
And they're blaming the United States.
The market's down 8.5% from the open tonight. Over half, 54% of all Chinese stocks have been halted. Something to keep your eye on, and we thank you for that information. But we're going to sign off for tonight. Tomorrow night, we'll be back with Dane Wingington and Steve Quayle. Till then, stay safe. God bless, and have a great night.